Sorry, this is what he heard from his boss, already knowing what would follow. The reason is not at all that they don't like him, but simply the economy is unstable. The boss clearly did not believe what he said. All these are ordinary excuses, so that a person who lost his job would not be very upset. The decision has already been made, so now the boss could say any peacekeeping nonsense. Of course, they would like to continue cooperation. The company knows how hard he worked for these 2 years. Lee In-ho, that was the name of this guy, took everything steadfastly, without unnecessary emotions. The decision was already made. Nothing can be done. There is no point in arranging a scandal. 2 years ago, he came to this contract for 2 years, during which time it was worth showing himself properly. And Lee really worked a lot, moving towards his goal to become a regular employee, clutching at any assignment. But in the end, his contract did not extend. Restructuring squeezed out of himself an uncomfortable word for the language called as if a spell. Explain everything. The guy answered as always that he understands everything and does not hold evil. The boss immediately rejoiced that everything went easier than he thought and even praised his positive attitude in any position. All the empathy of the dismissed employee was a formality. Looking at the laughing not at the boss's place, Lee In-ho thought that he was always so superficial. The boss immediately added that the guy is still young. Even if he's not all right with his body, he will succeed everywhere. These words were cut with a knife so that Lee quietly squeezed his fists under the table. Everyone who worked with him these 2 years involuntarily turned around and listened to their conversation. The boss offered to have lunch today and cheer up at the same time, with the help of a plate of a soup from a blood sausage. A little out of order, these words of the chef were stuck in the head of a young guy and thought about them with cold prudence. Turning to the boss Lee In-ho, he refused the offer to the restaurant with such a menu. It was necessary to go about 10 minutes. He said that to eat himself separately and involuntarily looked at his right leg. Even 10 minutes at least to cost him a lot of effort, and the boss knew it but did not attach much importance. Lee In-ho rose. He was a tall young man who was forced to turn to the ground, holding his leg. Of course, there was no other meeting. He simply went out onto the roof of their office, using the elevator to sit on a bench in full, holding a paper cup with a coffee from a machine gun in his hands. The sky remained blue and pure, like a mockery of his world full of concerns and darkness. Nevertheless, looking at the city from a high roof, the guy understood that he would miss this place. Once he was quick and free and the most promising athlete of South Korea, he fled like a wind. But happiness did not last long, as often happens in this cruel world. A car accident happened, or maybe someone helped it happen. The three-legged fracture of the ankle is not the thing with which Olympic gold is conquered. So his leg became out of order. Since then, he still wanted to run to the limit of strength and capabilities until his heart bursts. But all this was possible perhaps in the next life. What he thought so deeply about, the girl asked him that it turned out to be so close that he felt the smell of her light citrus spirits. She sat down next to her legs together, and her name was Chain. The guy did not notice when the girl sat down next to him. This divine, beautiful girl came to work on a contract by the secretary a week later, which brought them closer. And now brown eyes gently looked at him, as if trying to penetrate his mind. And what he thinks about, she asked him Chain, and involuntarily moved closer. About the search for a new job, I answered her In-ho and looked again at the sky. The meaning of life excited him much stronger. Chain smiled charmingly and waved her hand, because he was not dismissed to think about this, she said, not suspecting that this was what happened. But everything was exactly so, and In-ho made it clear that he was not joking. He was fired today, calling it a restructuring, he said, parodies of the chef's voice. The guy was already reconciled with everything, so his face was completely calm when he looked at the girl. Hearing such sad news, she sincerely became sad and did not immediately find what to say. She became ashamed that she spoke so tactlessly because Chain apologized and famously answered that it was not her fault. He did not yet know when he was leaving about this to report separately. And then Lee In-ho heard a strange voice in his head, performed, minted with metal notes, as if the car said. The final decision was made. His voice rapped out again. He sounded like an announcement on a speakerphone, but Chain also heard him from his head. An hour later, the mission will begin. They both heard this message and looked at each other in surprise. Everyone who was the site also heard a strange voice and began to talk about it. It was decided to sell this world. In this regard, a restructuring would be carried out. From these words, In-ho thought that he was hallucinating. But then the chief of Choi approached them and called the girl that he was his secretary. He led her department and rudely asked why Chain was still sitting here, because the dinner was already over. The girl tried to justify herself that all due to a strange announcement, but the boss rudely reported the employee for being forgotten due to such nonsense. With such zeal, she can't become a full-time employee, and it would be better to hurry to the workplace, the harmful boss added, and these words painfully stabbed In-ho. Therefore, he immediately objected that everything was in order so far and rose from the bench. After all, until the end of the dinner, another quarter of an hour, and the path back takes a couple of minutes, so that Chain will have time on time. Choi did not like that someone would recall him, and he immediately remembered the guy in front of him rudely poked his finger at him. "The lame guy who was recently fired," boss said tactlessly. Chain did not know what to say and looked uncertainly with regret at her friend. If he has flaws, he should try to add the chief of Choi more, as if the previous one was not enough. But Inho took everything in cold blood. The first mission began, a voice suddenly said again. During the allotted time, it was necessary to go into the indicated zone. She just caught fire with a green light right behind the chief of Choi. 1 minute was assigned to complete the assignment with a countdown timer, and the zone itself was very close. The chief of Choi and his assistant took everything for the event arranged by the creative department, which was a sign of obvious dementia. But are there really smart bosses? For a gaming event, everything looked supernatural, Inho thought, as before. He steadily perceived everything that had happened, keeping his mind. The chief of Choi went the other way from the green zone, without ceasing to mock over the lame guy. "He can visit an orthopedist," he asked his assistant, and he, barely hiding the mockery, replied that it was worth going to the physiotherapist. But Inho simply ignored them. His born mind of the fighter was busy with more important things. Chain apologized for what happened, although there was no guilt in this. But the guy has long been used to ridicule, and they did not hurt him, although Chain did not believe this. She asked him what to do now, and Inho suggested watching a little. Holding onto his leg, he took a few steps towards the green zone. Only 10 seconds were left before the completion of the assignment. The image was like a hologram, and this alone caused alertness. However, a couple of friends continued to conduct a relaxed conversation as if nothing had happened. The girl coped with his plans for the future, and Lee answered that she would simply look for a new job. Meanwhile, the boss and his assistant found that the door to the elevator did not open. As soon as the workers went into the zone, as they were seized with a strange and anxious feeling. He himself did not know why he felt such a strong danger. Chain was also worried. And then the guy turned around. Several people had not yet managed to enter the zone. Time was released, the system said. From that moment they conduct restructuring. Those who did not enter the zone felt as if they were with sandpaper. Before disappearing, their faces, horror touched. They screamed for the last time, and Inho could not believe what he sees at such moments. You even do not have time to get scared as it should. A status window appeared in front of his face. Almost 200 people were just erased from the face of the earth. Only 1% reached a safe zone in their company. In the status window, there was his data. The system awarded him different characteristics, intelligence, and others. Dexterity had only 1, and yet Inho clicked on the leg in the hope that it would cure it. As soon as he touched the image, right there his leg was covered with green light. Everything worked quickly, as in the game. The system told him that the ability to walk was restored by 20%. Chain asked him whether he saw all this. Judging by the status window, there should have been other areas and test zones. It was impossible to say who did it and why. But it is obvious that if you lose once, you just disappear, which means that another message will appear soon. As expected, the system reported that the second mission will begin soon. A safe zone will be randomly created as soon as the countdown begins. 5 minutes were given to the second zone. They will have to move quickly. The second mission will be more difficult than the first, suggested Inho, and Chain asked why he thinks so. As the aliens who arranged this said, this is a restructuring, which means they will choose the most valuable. The competition will be much tougher than in the first mission, especially since now everyone should have guessed what awaits them. And that means fierce rivalry will flare up between people. He himself retained composure. Now unnecessary thoughts would only prevent him from. It was worth fighting not only for the sake of survival. He received a chance to cure his leg as a reward for the mission. To check his guesses, Inho stomped his foot, still feeling in her tingling needles of pain. But it definitely became easier. Even 20% changed its speed. He corrected his tie so that it was easier to breathe and told Chain that they should hurry. Having thrown off the company employee of the company, he offered to look for a weapon. Be that as it may, it is possible his fate to be dismissed today and get the opportunity to change fate. Inho waved his hand and called the Chain behind him. The girl did not quite understand where the weapon could find where in the office. And he asked what he was thinking about. Of course he understood that there would be nothing accessible in the office. Now nothing occurred to the guy himself, while it could be thought in this direction. Chain was in alarmedly asked him if she should also take something and received an affirmative answer. After all, everyone must protect himself. Saying it, he failed a certain line between them. Chain was even more alarmed and did not find what to answer. Inho suggested waiting for the zone here, and if it does not arise nearby, then go down the stairs and not on the elevator, although it was easier. At a moment, everyone will rush to the elevator and prevent each other to use it. It is much safer to go to the free stairs. That's just whether he can go down the stairs. The girl's question arose by itself. For a few more moments, his legs were slow and clumsy. Even simple walking was given with pain, but now thanks to the system he could walk again. The mission began. Inho promised himself to withstand, even if his legs would be broken into pieces. To get to the safe zone, 10 minutes were allotted. The system appeared in the system, showing the nearest points. Both were on the lower floors. The 19th, 11th, and 3rd, the points were distributed evenly. It was logical to get to the nearest refuge up the stairs. Overcoming the pain of Inho quickly descended after Chain. He answered her that was in order, although he didn't look like that. Sweat flowed down his high forehead. The girl offered to relax with them still time, but the guy refused. Of course he was tired, but past workouts made themselves felt. In comparison with them, this fatigue was nothing. He again felt his fingers, so he was ready to sob with happiness. Even from one reward, he became so easier. So they got to the 19th floor. Chain opened the doors and entered the corridor first. He turned out to be completely empty, which was amazing. And where everyone went? The girl asked, looking around. When they went around the corner, they saw people that crowded in the green zone. As expected around her, brawls started. People pushed each other. Instead of organizing and escaping, they succumbed to despair. Fear devoured them from the inside. Chain was alarmed again, but Inho expected something worse, so he remained calm. However, it was unclear how to push around to the zone because they came the last. The guy estimated that the zone could be accommodated by 100 and no more than 60 people, so they should fit. He already managed to count on the length of the steps. Each step 30 centimeters, enough for one person to stand. The width of the zone is 16 steps. The length is 7. Only 112 cells, if all of course build and do not push. Chain was surprised that he always counted his steps. His habit, developed in the classes of athletics, intensified after an injury. Each step was given with pain, and this laid out its imprint. Chain was shocked. He was like a superhero, the girl said. There was only a minute left, people pushed inside, the ladder pierced them to give them a place. Inside, a crush formed, so the Chain pressed tightly to Inho. It's good that they hastened, but it was still early to relax. And then they heard a loud and desperate scream for help. Everyone turned around and saw a man in the glasses that begged him to miss. Chain recognized this person. It was one of the bosses of her department. He also recognized her in the crowd and looked through the gap between the bodies right at the girl, as if clinging to himself. He poked a finger at her and began to scream her name, as if their past ties had a meaning. He put his hand into the crowd and demanded that the girl grab her, drag him inside. But when the girl moved towards him, Inho stopped her. If she steps forward, he can also leave, her boyfriend warned. Only 5 seconds were left, and anticipating the inevitable boss screamed with horror, begging to help him at least once. Then Chain demonstrated that there is humanity in it and rushed towards the boss. She was ready to take a chance and pushed people to get to the border. In the last second, she threw his hand to his help. There were enough places in the zone for everyone, but the head of the department decided to dramatically climb only half. And at the same moment, it turned out, everyone who was not in the zone was subject to restructuring. The boss begged not to let him go because he was still in the zone. Chain nodded frantically and agreed. Applying efforts, she still tried to drag the boss inside the zone. The barrier that before that was the usual light now not let it go inside. But suddenly it became very easy. They both fell, having lost their balance. And the head of the department was easier than she thought. She decided Chain that she painfully plopped down. However, when she saw the result of her efforts, she was dumbfounded. The grave cold ran along her back. Unable to withstand such a shock, Chain screamed in horror, clutching her head. Inho immediately began to pour the rest to get to her. The girl blamed herself in everything because she could pull the director before. The system said that another 1,000 people were erased. According to the results of this task, 700 people remained. Inho tried to console his friend. Now it was not the time to fall into a stupor, because the next task will soon begin. She should get a reward and recover. However, Chain still did not move away from what she saw. Before her eyes, the half of the boss's body disappeared. Looking his girlfriend in the face, he realized that she was completely shocked. She lacked mental stability. And then Inho dawned. He caused his status to check if it is possible. There was a ghostly hope that with the help of a reward you can improve mental well-being. Among the bonuses there was really mental resistance, so Inho hurried to the T. She barely responded, so he persistently asked her to fulfill one request. And slowly, by syllables, he explained what needs to be done and where to press in the system. The girl acted like a robot, but repeated everything exactly. As soon as she received an improvement, she was seized with a cloud of light, and the force filled her mind. Inho did not know this worked or not because he called her. In the future, they have to see more terrible things, and he was thinking about taking the girl by force if she did not have enough stability. Chain jumped up as if a toy. She critically examined her torn tights as if it were her main problem. And then she stated that she was going to change. There was no more a shadow of anxiety on her face. Everything changed as fast as if by magic, Inho noted to himself. Now everyone was doing the same. They thought how to distribute the glasses earned in 2 missions. To check some guesses, Inho began to ask questions to the system. It turned out that it was impossible to choose a reward that would save from restructuring. Weapons like a pistol were also not available. The former athlete decided not to give up so simply. Not in vain he developed so much patience during his chroma. Is it possible to get the ability to foresee the future or fly? Made an incredible assumption of Inho. The system replied that at this stage it is impossible to answer. This already said a lot. There would be another stage after that, but the system could not confirm its guesses. Of course, this devilish game was in no hurry to reveal all the cards. The guy immediately understood and sighed. Whoever started this monstrous selection, he clearly conceived him for a reason. First, Inho decided to completely restore his leg, after the award of its functions increased to 70% of the norm. Having examined his condition, he realized that he could now even run, albeit not at full speed. Chain that approached him noticed this change, and realized how her friend used the award. Another mission and he will definitely restore it completely, and then it just began. They didn't even let him be indignant to talk. Chain immediately checked the place on the map. The nearest zone was on the 15th floor, in the conference room. Inho suggested going right away, because most people should already be there. Chain wanted to ask him something, but the guy decided to talk along the way. The girl was struck that Inho was almost not surprised when he saw the body torn in half. An ordinary person would confuse from such a spectacle. And then the former athlete explained to her that he had special training in psychological stability. Secondly, he survived the death of his parents in a car accident when he was still a child. This became a much more significant shock. Chain immediately apologized for asking too much, maybe due to the fact that his legs were almost completely restored, but Inho was filled with confidence that he would survive. Chain nodded and added that they would survive, and smiled. Perhaps they became a little attached to each other, passing a couple of missions together. Opening the door, the guy rushed down the stairs. However, the third safe zone became a real nightmare. Before their eyes, people fought like animals. The man fell to the ground after the blow, and the rest staggered back. The entrance to the zone was narrow. The door width and defending its healthy man with a stick was not difficult. Inho frowned. Everyone wanted inside, but no one was ready to sacrifice himself. Even when they ran up the stairs, Chain asked him what they would do if the zone was already busy. "We'll have to break through," the guy answered shortly, hoping that he would not reach. However, their worst fears came true, and at the zone they were met by an evil and desperate person. He did not disassemble a man or woman in front of them and drove away everyone who tried to go to the zone. He was frantically waving a stick. He did not allow anyone to enter. For the office plankton, one aggressive person became a serious obstacle, although there were a lot of people who wanted to get into the zone nearby. Violence began long before free places in the zone ended. I thought Inho all happened as he expected. People before the entrance began to scold the healthy man that one had settled in the shelter and did not let anyone in, although there was still a place nearby. But this only angered him more strongly, because they were always neglected as an employee with a temporary contract. Know them all how he suffered because of them. They would not have ordered him now. Inho recognized this man. He worked in the support department, Quant Don-sok, as a deputy chief. In the year before last, he replaced the head of the departed on vacation, remembered Chain. And he, too, should have been fired after the contract. In this sense, they were in the same position with Inho, and Quant Don-sok for this reason did not feel due to something to his former employees. Previously, they had already met. For a second, Inho plunged into memories. Despite the major physique, this man always lean and roble, so he looked quiet. At work, he was constantly attacked by higher authorities. And now his boss shouted indignantly at Kavan, asking that he was doing. About Sanma, the head of the support department contemptuously stated that he had sheltered a worthless, unheated donkey, and this is what he was doing. For which the Quant immediately calculated with the boss, sting his stick in the face, and for all his past sins too. "He is not livestock to shelter him," Quant answered coldly. The boss Sanma collapsed unconscious to the floor, and everyone froze with horror. The killer timidly stuck people like sheep. Someone screamed with horror. Chain was also worried. Despite the increased moral resistance to violence, it is not so easy to get used to it. Nevertheless, she understood that Kavan had his own reasons. The smug chief sucked all the juices from him. The clerk brought him to the extremes, killed him. But Inho counted differently. It was not in an instant impulse of emotions. After the murder, Kavan was greatly trembling pupils, and he was choking, and his hands swept over a disturbing tremor. However, next to the clerk lay many pots and fragments of dishes that could be used as a weapon. This man planned his retribution long before the time came to fulfill it. As soon as people in the office could not notice that their employee is on the verge of an explosion, Quan screamed again to everyone so that they did not even think to meddle with him because they themselves saw what would happen. There was little time left. Some weak-willed women immediately surrendered and decided to go to another floor. Chain also wondered what to do, because in this state the Quant was definitely not located to negotiations. But Inho did not react and patiently waited. Perhaps at that moment there was a small chance that Kavan calmed down and was ready for dialogue, so the guy moved forward. Chain looked excitedly after him. Without fear of the blow, Inho came close to the green zone. He deliberately held his hands in his pockets so as not to cause fear of the enemy. In a completely calm and polite tone, Inho greeted the healthy man Kavan as if they had just met in an ordinary worker, a day, and offered to talk like a contractor's colleagues. From his calm, the Quant was dumbfounded and even stopped running around with pupils. With his actions, he digs his grave, warned Inho, still not expressing any threat. If you reason soberly, you can understand that now everyone is performing complex missions, and it is not known where and when the help of others will be needed, and you need to fight for survival together. But what about his current? He dumbfounded Inho with his question. Now he is the killer of his boss, which means the most inappropriate and dangerous team candidate. Simply put, he is the person whom everyone wants to destroy in the first place. Given the specifics of the missions, loners had advantages, but in the future everything could change, so it is better to find allies in advance. These thoughts were in no hurry to voice these conclusions, and only added that fortunately, it's not too late, because not only the Quant was angered towards his boss. If he stops now, others can understand his breakdown, finished Inho and gave Kavan to think, thus lingering him a comfortable path for reconciliation. He could kill them all by refusing cooperation, but he could spare. Quan did not answer anything, but only crouched and took his hand by the pot with a flower. When I realized that he was going to do it, screamed so that Inho would evade. The pot flew down exactly in the head and crashed against the face of the unfortunate. But it turned out to be a poor fellow that he stood behind the former athlete. It's not that they are equal, Quan asked, and called Inho contemptuously chrome-legged. If the former athlete had not calculated the distance, he himself was fashed under the blow. Quan refused to cooperate, and there was very little time left for another plan. Then he received a notification from the system. The parameters of the use of skills are changed. Previously, this was not to mention the fact that skills can be activated. And only then he remembered that now is not the time to read messages, because Quan already swung to strike. The board would definitely beat off his head if someone tall had not dragged Inho back. This kind stranger asked whether everything was in order, and Inho thanked him for his help. Thanks to him, he remained intact. He had not seen this guy before. He promised to cover the highly high as if from the basketball league. After stepping aside, they learned that his name is Jekek. He worked in a trading department on the 17th floor. And then he said that he would go down to all of them to survive, but Inho stopped him, saying that it was too late. They missed the time to search for another zone. On the lower floors, the situation may be similar, he added, and then anxiety appeared on Jehek's face. According to the manner of the young guy, Inho realized that the military man, Jek, was surprised and admitted that he was demobilized only last year with the rank of sergeant. The former athlete turned to Chain and invited them all to work together, and she realized that he already had some kind of plan. In order to break through, they needed a shield that blocked all the Kavana weapons, Inho briefly told them. They thought about his words in search of a shield of an object, and then all together looked at the stand that was behind. They could only break through because the timer showed for 2 minutes. The workers that they did not dare to run further waited at the entrance, hoping that the healthy man will be distracted. Their anger only increased, and they all showered him with curses for the fact that he dooms everyone to death. But Quan was inexorable and only contemptuously looked at former employees. Then one girl went to Kvan and began to tearfully beg him tearfully let her in because she did not want to die. And he contemptuously asked her what she would give him for this, from which the girl squeezed. And then Quan repeated his question squinting, because not for free, he should save her. But then they heard a noise and turned around, on a strange rustle. The whole crowd also looked back before the shelter. Chain and Jekek pushed a heavy stand in front of them, on which presentations usually make. The chance is given only once, he said hard, Inho heading for them. According to his signal, they had to cover the board, come close to the entrance, and then turning it around the end to go inside, even if the board breaks. The former athlete told them not to panic and push to the end. There is nothing left to enter the zone. Inho followed and covered them with a long mop, which was suitable only to distract the enemy. Pushing everyone, they were able to bring a heavy shield directly to the door, and at first the Quant could not do anything about it. And then he began to hammer without a special purpose right on the glass of the shield. He managed to break him, but not completely, so Chain was not injured. Then Inho gave a signal to turn the shield, continued to command the operation. Everything went well. The Kavan did not expect this, and could not do anything. However, here Inho miscalculated, because the fat man had stored another weapon that he immediately launched the entrance. The clerical knife is not the most dangerous weapon in the world, but in their circumstances could troubles. However, Jehek did not run away, and did not throw the shield, although he grimaced in pain. Clutching the wound, he fell to the floor and Inho immediately rushed to his aid. With a blow of the leg, the former athlete knocked out knives from the hands of Kavan. The fat man covered himself with a crossed block. He was sure that he would not lose the lame disabled. But the guy was not going to fight him on an equal footing, but simply hit the mop. Now they were all in the zone. Supporting Jehek, she followed. Quan cursed and began to rise, and Inho turned in his direction. He again called the former athlete a cripple, not suspecting that this was not so. To give himself courage, he growled the precisely wounded beast, and he rushed with all his might at the Inho, who simply stood and waited for him. Each animal has a basic set of feelings, the guy thought, looking at Kavan. A person or mouse, a rush of aggression deprives any reason and sanity. This is just a blind desire for the goal. Kuvan spread his fingers to grab Inho. He first on him like a bull on Matadora, and the former athlete simply dodged to the side. Thus, the fat man inertia flew further and was outside the shelter. And then the notification came that time has expired, and Quan was seized with horror. All the remaining people cursed Quan for the fact that because of them they would disappear. He stared at his crumbling hands, not believing that this could happen. Inho read a dumb question in his eyes, but looked at everything with complete indifference. And then everyone disappeared, as if they had never been. In the office just filled with life, it became deafeningly empty and quiet. They were the only ones who survived. The mission is completed. Choose the award told them the system in the head inside the head. And again, Inho chose the restoration of the leg, his only weakness that restrained all this time. As he expected, his leg was completely recovered, as if there was no nightmare. There were no more delays or discomfort. The leg moved exactly as he wanted. The former athlete took a few steps to make sure of this. Chain also noticed this change in him and asked how he was. Inho said that everything was fine and thanked her for his help, because without her, this would not have happened. However, now there was no time for delights. He only returned to normal, like all people, while the rest improved the selected skills. But then the groans of Jekek attracted their attention, which they forgot about for a while. Despite the fact that the sergeant visited the army, from a small cut, he felt bad and he was all pale. And now he stretched out on the floor and breathed deeply. Feeling the cold floor, he decided to say goodbye and began to pronounce the word prepared for this case. I was glad to serve with you and all that. He also asked to convey to his mother that he loves her, what Inho looked at with complete indifference. From the eyes of the sergeant, the thoughts of the mother flowed. But Inho calmly told him that the wound was not deep, the blood itself stopped, which means Jahek would withstand the rest and could stand up. The pain was such that he thought that she would die. Chain invited him to recover with the help of a reward. Inho just asked him whether he chose a reward for the mission, and then he invited the sergeant to choose the characteristic of the restoration. The wound was too insignificant to spend the skill on it, but the intensification of regeneration looked like a more useful thing. Jekek was shocked like a child and was surprised as soon as Inho thought of this. Then the athlete himself wondered how many years to the sergeant, and he honestly admitted that he was already 25. Inho was 28, 3 years older. Despite the mature appearance of Jekek, it turned out to be younger, even for a year. Now the sergeant recognized the elders in them and sincerely thanked for salvation. His huge palm sank heavily on the shoulder of Inho, so he felt her weight. The sergeant said that now they can turn to him as the youngest and showed a finger up. Inho nodded and told them to prepare for the next mission, get a reward, and wait for instructions from the system. Now they were on the 15th floor, which was the middle of the building, so it would be convenient to move. As long as it was possible to collect as much information as possible, and thought Inho, especially what lies behind the disclosure of skills. The trinity of comrades went out to look around in an empty office. The wound on the muscular torso of Jahek completely dragged on. It was surprising because it was worth only once to pump the restoration. The wound closed in a matter of minutes, even without scars. Meanwhile, Inho ran a shuttle step, without explaining to anyone why he was doing this, and then stopped to catch his breath. All this time he checked his guesses and understood something. The system collected not only the data about the body. After he ran through, the percentage of opening skills rose to 80. Each time the percentage scale fled, even faster than it thought. In addition to physical factors affecting growth, there was also a psychological one, which also had a strong influence. Inho was curious to understand what skill would be revealed if you fill out the scale. If they were in the game, he would choose the attacking ability, but it was not a game, and it was necessary to choose something useful. But then the system announced that the last test of this stage will soon begin. Chain and Jahek were immediately delighted to hear the last word, thinking that a little more and the nightmare end. But Inho knew that this was impossible, too many survivors, so they would not have been delayed here. Chain suggested waiting at the stairs, and the sergeant agreed with her, hoping to try the last time with all his might. Inho put on a jacket. The system mentioned the second stage earlier, and still distributed skills. The competition will become only tougher in the future. That was what he thought about. The mission began, and the next safe zone met them with a real hell. As expected, people tore each other into parts, reinforced by skills from awards. It was no longer a game, but a real arena for a deadly match, incredibly cruel. Chain and Sergeant stared at Inho, who due to his composure was a kind of leader, and asked him to do what to do. In general, the chaos, everything looked like a direct breakthrough was impossible. The former athlete appreciated the situation. They should have been careful because it is not known who received what skill. And then the thought occurred to him, and the comrades began to listen carefully to him. Inho pointed to the partition what was behind people, and he said that they need to get there unnoticed. They climbed at one of the stands. A ladder appeared in the hands of Inho, moved quickly but without fuss. The sergeant was surprised when he realized that their leader wants to climb up. The former athlete nodded. He wanted to climb the screen, and Chain asked him what he would do later. And then you just need to overturn it, and it will be in a safe zone. Of course, people that they will be injured under the screen, but will not die. This plan helped them avoid the battle, although it was not only the system expected from them, but everything that was not prohibited, which means it is possible. From past experience, Inho knew that there are always stairs in the exhibition halls. Now when the plan was clear to everyone, they could begin to act. The stands looked fragile so that Jekek began to worry, no matter how everything overturned on them. After waiting for the time before the end, there was only half a minute left. They started. The athlete told them to jump as soon as the stand falls, and the chain nodded. Jekek, as the strongest of them, was supposed to push. He took a deep breath and concentrated. On the command of Inho that he watched the timer, they pushed the partition. People that grabbed in a deadly battle were surprised why it suddenly got dark. They even stopped fighting and turned back. And realizing that a huge screen falls on them, they began to scatter to the sides in horror. The trinity of the comrades were on the hill, and the safe zone was completely free. Inho ordered Chain and Sergeant to occupy the zone as quickly as possible. As the leader, he went the last. They had to rush until others reacted and took place. Time was calculated perfectly, just so that only they could have time. However, when Inho turned back, he saw that Chain did not reach the zone, and her former boss grabbed the girl's hand. Self-domestic and vile, he began to scream nasty things, and the fact that she was obliged to serve him, as if it had some kind of meaning now. Without hesitation, Inho rushed to help his ally to help her. Instead of just going to the zone, the Chief Pak held the girl and said that they would either come together or no one. But Chain was able to break out of his grip and threw her hand with her elbow. The old boss began to fall, surprised by the decisive removal of the girl. Thanks to mental stability, she did not lose control and remembered that until the end, there were a few seconds. However, she could not get into the zone. Her head suddenly pulled with force and pain back. Pak grabbed her hair without ceasing to water with curses. As a drowned man, he grabbed the last straw, risking to destroy both of them. Inho aimed and waved his hand to which he held a sharp object. In order not to waste time, he simply shut the hair through his hair. In the end, they will grow again if they survive. The Chief Pak lost his balance and began to fall, looking in amazement at a bundle of hair in his hand. Chain turned in confusion, suddenly feeling that the grip disappeared and nothing more restrains her. Inho used the half of the scissors, sharp enough to cut a bunch of hair when moving, but it is better not to repeat this house. Then, inspecting an empty office, he found what can be used as a weapon, and he came across large scissors for paper, better than nothing. To make it more convenient, he broke them in half and imprisoned a little about the metal corner of the table. Such an object could be cut, as well as apply a painful injection. A sharp blow to the athlete, Inho sent the head of Pak to his last flight, completely free. He rolled on the ground, losing slippers, and he grinned plaintively from pain and despair, like a beaten dog. The system ruthlessly mentioned its verdict: the mission is completed. Pak still tried to get up and mumble something, but no one listened to him. Restructuring took with him all his sorrows and regrets. A little noise similar to the sound of thrown garbage into the basket, and everything subsided. Jekek looked at the hair of the chain and cried out in surprise. He immediately embarrassed his scream and asked for forgiveness. The girl lost her long, beautiful hair, but this could be considered a small payment for life. Inko himself was a little nervous because he cut off the hair of another woman without demand. The situation were extremely awkward between them. The guy could not say whether she was angry or not when Chain came closer. But turning around, she asked to make it shorter so that this would no longer happen. The girl took this loss easily, and even with optimism, Inho noted. Having showed her a half of the scissors, he said that now he could not be her stylist because of broken scissors. Jekek immediately volunteered to find others, like Chain did not care at all that they were standing on the stand that fell on people. The survivors remained 16 people. The sergeant again thanked their leader for the fact that they survived thanks to him, but Inho modestly replied that this was not only his merit. The familiarization is completed. The payment for familiarization will be made at a time, the system said. Some even got out of the stand on their own. The noise began in the hall due to the fact that many thought this was their last mission. Of course, everything could not end so easily, Inho thought. The space in front of the survivors began to break at the seams, like a fabric. Administrator writes activate the project. The name selection, the system again reported, and someone's person appeared from the hole. Lightning went around the hall and everyone froze without knowing what to expect further. As it became clear from the name of the project and the previous familiarization of its goal to conduct a selection. However, Inho understood that a real game begins only now. Everyone sighed in horror, presenting what other horrors awaited them if everything that was before that was only the beginning. Before the survivors materialized, a strange girl. 16, so much, indignantly said a little-haired little woman. In appearance, she looked like a middle-class student, so her appearance did not seem to have much importance. Even without unnecessary explanations, it was clear that she was the administrator of this event, Inho thought. The girl's gaze was terrible and evil when one of the survivors called her. The guy who had just crawled out from under the stand shouted to her who she was. Suddenly, the girl appeared right in front of him, moving instantly. She was tiny and kept in the air in a completely magical way. The administrator asked this screamer, who came up with an idea with a screen. Inho immediately noted such an ability to himself and thought that he could be able to get the like as a reward. Jahek realized that the strange girl was looking for him, but the former athlete preferred to wait first, although the administrator's tone was approving. But then someone at the back of the back, and Inho turned around in surprise. Some elderly woman uncertainly stated that the idea with the screen was her merit. Another employee asked Madame Yu why she intervenes if she doesn't even know the reasons. Apparently, she decided that she could get something for it. Between them, a quiet dispute flared up, at which the girl administrator looked with a bored look. And then she instantly moved to the old woman and hung over her head. With a ruthless look, the girl asked if the old woman did it. The one who was addressed by Madame Yu trembled with fear. It is amazing that she was generally selected, and said that in fact it was not her. Realizing that the old woman did not do anything, the administrator got angry. Why she would climb then indignant. At that moment, everyone experienced a similar feeling, as if cold is in every word. And in this atmosphere tense to the limit, the soul constrains with chilling horror, the administrator gave a heavy sigh. And then she pointed a finger at the old woman that she was afraid to even get to her feet. The girl's face became gloomy and sinister, and a strange force enveloped the old woman. In the next instant, she fell dead to the ground, which is why her acquaintances cried out with horror. They began to babble incoherently and trembled like frightened mice. The girl administrator critically examined all those present. There were 15 of them left, and even nerves were surrendered from its composure. It was a couple of trifles to kill a person for her. The girl said something that she was very busy to conduct an interview with everyone. She mentioned some kind of company and a survey of candidates. Inho considered that it was important. Raising his hand, the administrator was convinced that everyone was looking at her and said that she would ask everyone only once. She was interested in which of them the athlete, and the girl demanded that they raise her hand. No one lifted. Then she asked who the singer or actor. The question itself was strange, because they were all employees of the AIT company. And the last question sounded even wonderful, whether the one who left the global heritage among them created a great work of art. One of the survivors raised his hand and asked whether the creation of blogs enters this category. However, the administrator only contemptuously frowned and warned that if he said such stupidity again, she would make his mouth wider, from which the boy involuntarily banged and clamped his mouth. The administrator looked around disappointedly and reflected aloud whether to kill everyone at once. And then, as if having estimated something in the mind, she stated that she would distribute awards for an introductory stage randomly because she was too lazy. And by clicking a finger, she disappeared so and without explaining to anyone, and the system said that the first stage was activated in the project. An arena opens from the rights of the administrator. Another message has appeared. As Inho assumed from this stage, the mission changed. There was no more card and safe zones. It was worth preparing to prepare properly. For example, if there is a battle like a race with a slight use of force, then dexterity is the best parameter. But now an unknown variable arena has appeared, and the conditions of subsequent missions are also unpredictable. The safest choice is to take something as universal as possible. As a reward, they were supposed to 1 point of characteristics and a random box. Inho was surprised, but the box really appeared, and she looked like a regular gift in red packaging. As soon as he touched her, she vibrated, as if she were about to explode. For a second, Inho thought that it could be a trap, and I decided to wait for what would happen to others when they opened their awards. One of the guys fell a whole box of paper bills. In one fell swoop, he received $500 million out of tax. And the completely useless here, Inho thought, looking at this picture. If restructuring has covered the planet, then the world has already been destroyed like the whole civilization. Another girl was delighted with a new bag of fashion brand, the value of which could be lower than a piece of bread. Inho reached for the gift. The priority was to receive protective equipment, and then what gives an attack. With one light movement of the finger, the administrator could cut off someone's life. Who knows how many more monsters he will meet in the future? 3 awards were used to restore the leg, and now he needed what to compensate for the break with other people. Praying to all the gods so that something useful falls out, Inho hit the box with an open palm. He was covered by light, and the system reported that he received an accidental reward. Swords and shields fell to others, and they now uncertainly examined this medieval equipment. The first weapon used by a person was much more primitive than even these relics. Something like a tomahawk used by ancient people on the hunt. Jekek had real armor, which he joyfully informed his elder. They were strange because Kirasa covered only the bottom of the chest, leaving the top open, and the stomach. The sergeant carefully asked Inho what happened to him. His loud exclamation of surprise immediately attracted the attention of everyone else. In his hands he held a simple stone, with slaughter force less than even the most primitive tool. Someone even laughed, because their things like an ordinary cloak no longer seemed so useless. Luck too, the skill thought Inho, trying not to despair and not to pour tears. Jaehaek tried to console him because the stone could be a rare meteorite. Without answering them, Inho looked at Chain. She liked her dagger, the former athlete noted. This serpentor went to the hand well, a great reward for the girl. She waved it several times to try, because for the first time she kept something but a kitchen knife. Inho was sure that this tool was useful in different situations. With complete indifference and composure, the girl cut her hair to make it even shorter. Inho was amazed at her moral stability. Undoubtedly, she and Jaehaek received excellent objects, so not everything was so bad in their team. However, the guy himself believed that he was a weak link in their detachment. He looked again at the cobblestone in his hand, not knowing what to do with it. The longer he looked at him, the more useless he seemed to him. It was unlikely that he would even have a good reason if he was thrown into someone. However, when Inho clicked his finger on him, the stone suddenly became supple and his finger was enveloped. The system reported that he absorbed the diamond of the Lost Mountains. His hand began to harden from the inside. The first petrification skill is obtained, the system explained again. The scope was limited because it received a small amount. Inho noted that skills can be obtained through awards, and he himself was not related to accumulated data. The skill was the first use on its index finger. Only strong skills are limited. Inho thought so hard and crouched to make sure of this. His comrades were worried about whether he found something, not understanding what their leader was doing. But then he showed them how he easily made a hole in the concrete floor with his petrified finger. It was a real skill from the game obtained thanks to the award. With such a strength that this skill gave, is not surprising that its area was limited. But what can be done with one finger, Inho thought. And then I decided to ask the system. It is possible to improve the skill using features of characteristics. This was possible, so Inho raised the skill to the second level, and the system invited him to choose an additional area of coding. Then the athlete chose the thumb of the right hand. For 2 fingers it was the best option. Then some screams came to them like someone cursed. A couple of lovers argued where to spend money out of the box. The girl demanded the house of the newlyweds, but the boy was already valid to marry. Now it became clear that these two secretly met together in the same company. A bottle of water rolled at the feet of Inho. It was strange because no one pushed her. She seemed to roll herself. The creed of the arena was completed by the system, and the guy was nervous. With every second, it was more difficult to keep balance. Paul moved began to fall unstable partitions. And then everyone rolled down the heaps as if the whole building had turned on their side. Inho shouted Jaehaek to grab the column and did not let her go so that it would not happen. He himself resisted, but Chain was not lucky and she slipped down. But the sweet couple who fell directly into the fire was not even more lucky, which was below the arena. Inho jumped after Chain without even hesitation. He extended his hand so that she could grab her, and with the help of his petrified fingers, he firmly fixed in the concrete floor. So he managed to stop slipping, on the floor almost vertically. Chain breathed heavily, but in general her position could be called normal. In a calm tone, Inho ordered her to hold onto his hand and not let go. He will pull her for now. However, the warning cry of Jaehaek made them look up from where a huge shield fell. So they hit the trap, unclench their fingers and fall into the fire, will remain in place and crush them with falling furniture. Inho quickly thought what to do when its measurement of data reached 100%. Based on its exceptional data, a special skill of acceleration of the first level was created. The guy was ready to cling to any straw if only it worked. But Inho himself was nailed to the place, as he could use acceleration. Having no other choice, he nevertheless applied acceleration. The score went for seconds, and even less. The time seemed to stop for a former athlete. The voice of Chain vaguely came to him as if in a slow shoot. At first, the guy could not understand what was happening. Time stopped, the breath of wind on the skin stopped. A few moments later, Inho asked Chain whether she came to herself. The girl looked around dumbfounded around, as if there was a break in her memory, and she tried to restore the causal chain of events. Everything was in order with her in general, and he asked Inho in amazement how he succeeded. The girl clearly remembered that he was holding it and then sharply let go. Then it just disappeared before her eyes, in order to miraculously be behind her and grab it on her arms, then quickly pulled out of the abyss itself so that she did not even really have time to understand anything. Even at the first level of acceleration, it was inhuman speed. Chain asked him how he managed to move so quickly. But the guy himself did not know. The skill himself just appeared, and he immediately used him without having time to figure out what was what. Apparently, it was possible to accumulate the necessary experience for activation. Having read the conditions, the skill accelerated his movement. In his eyes, everything moved more slowly. 1 second turned into 5. The skill had a restriction on the frequency of use, but with pumping it could be improved, in theory. If acceleration is increased, it was possible to achieve a complete stop of time. But then Chain remembered and turned around. The floor was again even, as if the building was returned to its original position. True, the feeling has been preserved that the floor is still swinging, as if they were floating on the water and are not in the building. Inho thought about this observation and himself began to inspect their arena. Now Paul's plane was turning in the other direction, and at the same moment, Jaehaek began to flee in their direction to reunite with the team. The suspicious sergeant was glad to see everyone lively and unharmed. They breathed a sigh of relief because they really almost parted with life. And then the floor again began to quickly leave from under their feet. Jaehyuk asked in amazement, "Is it not all because it was just calm?" Now everything became clear. The whole room is an arena, as if someone had placed a room on a sharp spire and forced to swing. This resembles the scales that swing in one and the other. The organizers of this event consider people to be unnecessary creatures and amuse them as they want, and the floor was slippery. They definitely wanted to kill everyone. People in a panic began to grab onto screwed objects so as not to fall. Inho ordered Jaehyuk to go back and stop when he finds a balance. The guy quickly reacted and ran upstairs. The army taught him to be executive. Chain pressed against the wall. It is better when fewer people move simultaneously. The balance was restored. Inho almost came across while its acceleration was restored. Fortunately, Jaehyuk turned out to be intelligent and quickly reacted. However, it was worth them to think that everything worked out as the floor swayed again. One guy ran with all his feet, ignoring all warnings that you could not move so sharply. The floor leaned again, but this madman did not listen and continued to run forward. He felt like a driven beast. How much more they would run here like hares, this man. The way out was right in front of him because he wanted to just leave the arena. But at some point, the floor leaned again, so the exit was inaccessible. And now the fool began to fly down towards the fire that he blazed under the arena. People in a panic were looking for to catch on, already understanding what everything was going to. Paul rushed more and threatening everyone to drop all. Understanding this, Jaehyuk wanted to do something, but did not know what exactly. And then the Inho that appeared next to Inho slapped the sergeant on the shoulder, ordered him to run in the opposite direction. Using acceleration, the former athlete disappeared from sight and began to circle between people. Many of his actions caused surprise, but not a person that hung in the air over the arena and watched everything. His name was Chvi, the youngest, scratching his chin. He said that this is an emergency. Choi went to the girl to the administrator, and she angrily reported him for distracting her from work. But the matter was urgent. In the 7th sector, the test was nearing completion, but the survivors were 13 to the moment. This information did not like the administrator. After all, the test should have killed all the survivors. Previously, she already mentioned that some smart is present in the sector, said Choi. There was one. The girl nodded without looking up from the screen. The one who overturned the screen into the safe zone from which there are so many survivors. At such a person she herself wanted to look because she ordered her to take her eyes to the arena and grinned ominously. Choi nodded dutifully and said that everything would be fulfilled. But before he left, the girl stopped him and turned around. And she told all the monsters from the 10th sector to lower down, which is why her subordinate shouted her name in surprise, Madame Haron. After all, the guy on the screen knew how to not only cunning but also fight, she said. Inho breathed heavily after his lightning, fast race, and held in his hand a desperate guy who almost did not overturn. He burst out not understanding why he was still here, and how this happened because he had just fallen down. But Inho strictly ordered him not to move, and he addressed the same thing to everyone else. If they want to live, then they should freeze in place. Inho did not want to reveal his abilities, especially since they had no time to explain. As he expected, the floor stopped moving, and soon the fire that burned below went out. The system announced the completion of the first mission of the project selection, and all the survivors breathed a sigh of relief, having overworked Inho and fell to the floor to relax. Again, Chain asked their leader how he committed his heroic act. Inho did not know what to answer. The main thing is that everyone survived and even laughed. Many people were scared. They already thought that they would burn alive. They also did not hide from them, that the guy moved faster than a person's capabilities. One of the survivors immediately stopped short and asked did not consider his words a nit, picking. Inho thought to explain everything, because these people could become his competitors. And then the walls, and especially the ceiling, trembled again, from which everyone was scared. The whole ceiling went with cracks and stones rained down from there. A gap appeared and a scarlet eye looked at them. A new mission begins, the system coldly informed them. Those who were weaker in horror screamed and grabbed their heads from a terrible roar. A silhouette of a strange creature appeared in the crack. The task is to destroy Kleshnikluvoy, the system said, and then everyone saw a bird. Like creature jumped out of the vault with a loud screech. It flew straight to Jaehyuk, who froze in indecision, not knowing what to do. He would definitely die if Inho had not rushed to his rescue and had not scooped up the guy to the side. The beak of creatures crushed the concrete floor and deeply pierced inside. Jaehyuk could only say to his elder to run in a trembling voice. But he abruptly cut off these decadent sentiments. There was nowhere to run resolutely. In addition, after the first creature, the second appeared and began to wave web wings. Chain suddenly asked Inho, shouting loudly whether to do it as before. He answered her that without weapons they would better evade. Seeing that, what a reasonable girl turned to another, who was called Yedzi, and asked her to lend a sword. The employee received a sword as a reward, but did not know how to use it at all. Yeji hesitated in indecision, but Chain insisted, and after all, they already saw what Inho was capable of. and now he will be able to save everyone if there is a sword. For greater conviction, Chain promised to return it after the mission. The girl trembled and cried and still did not dare to give to what was her only protection. Seeing a man with a shield, Chain asked him about the same, lending to equipment. When everything was ready, the girl screamed Inho to catch them. The shield and a sword slipped in his direction. Now he was armed, he could defend himself and attack. To deal with the new misfortune, Inho used the award for the last mission to improve his acceleration skill. Now he still had time. Inho hit his handle on the shield in order to attract the attention of the monster. And he shouted loudly to them to attack, despite the fact that this guy had never used weapons before his abilities. Jehek was immediately confused. The creatures and so looked evil, so why also provoke them, he cried out. Inho was already entirely focused on winged monsters, in the amount of 10 pieces, and in stock he had only a minute. In order for this to be able to collect all the monsters together, which is why he attracted attention, and as soon as they rushed to him, the guy used tenfold acceleration, so he easily evaded the first attack of the Skreeling, and then he chopped his neck with his sword, instead of pricking, because the sword for this suits the best, but as the newcomer Inho did not know about it. Then he repeated this simple maneuver several more times, the evasion of the attack, and so until only one monster was left. To finish off the latter, Inho took the blade with a reverse grip and swung from behind. Having landed on the monster's back, he broke through his back of his head that led to instant death. Meanwhile, the organizers of the test looked at everything with obvious indignation. They did not expect that Inho, an unremarkable guy of 29 years, would arrange so many problems for them. Harona looked at his characteristics, except for intelligence above average, the guy did not have. Choi noted that most likely the investigation department poorly collected information, and the high concentration of the population was also to blame. The boss looked angrily at him and demanded to explain herself intelligently, even if in his eyes it looks below the average, although in the 13th sector, such a high indicator is simply impossible. Choi became gray and trembled. He asked for forgiveness for his stupidity. Harona left him and grumbled displeasedly on the investigation department that he was doing incomprehensible what. As expected to trust their analysis recklessly, she said by slapping her hand on the table. Then she again reviewed the battle record from the arena. Only one parameter. The improvement in speed changed the entire course of the game, and testing, becoming an Inho bait attracted all the monsters to deal with them for one entry. Yesterday, it was an unremarkable person, so he was able to change his fate, suggested Cho. But Harona called it nonsense. The guy used the sword too uncertainly, and at first it was too clumsy. But with every step it changes quickly. He is characterized by high adaptability. And so even the first battle turned into training, I understood Choi. How interesting it was, Harona. One cuts cattle. The other, in the aspiration of dominance, will decapitate the ruling dynasty. She was looking forward to that he would demonstrate her. Inho himself, in the meantime, he took his breath. His head was dizzy. The second mission was completed, and the system began calculating intermediate points. Then she appropriated him over the highest rank. This was very surprised by Inho, who usually lacked the stars from the sky. In accordance with his rating, he received a reward, points of characteristics. For the achievements of the highest rank, he was given an additional 2 points. Looking at his bloodied hands, he suddenly realized that his merits had just been recognized in this place. He himself did not know how this happened, but now his plan that he was thinking was realized. Chain approached him to help remove dirt from his face and called softly. He did not respond because she asked if everything was in order with him. The guy himself was surprised he was still dumbfounded by what had happened, and his heart knocked greatly in his chest. Seeing how his eyes came to the Chain smiled sweetly, rejoicing that everything was in order with him. Inko himself smiled. For the first time since they got into this nightmare, he felt that he was not powerless. He could survive here with other people. The whole arena turned into a battle and was covered with carcasses of monsters. Even Chain struggled to look at this picture, although she pumped moral stability. Inho distracted her and carefully asked what rank was assigned to the girl. Thinking, she replied that she had reached the highest rank. The athlete asked Jehek the same question, looking not at him, and received the answer that the sergeant was assigned to the average rank. Here there is a real segregation of people by classes, and Inho thought about how to determine the class, possibly attaching it to the contribution to the mission. Having embarrassed, Jehek was still pleased with his average result, although he just ran and shouted. Inho looked again at the young sergeant, thinking whether it was worth calming him or not. The sergeant was completely dumb, but the comfort was better given the Chain. The athlete simply decided to take him a business and asked for help. At the monsters whom he killed quite long and durable beaks that, after processing, could be used as a weapon. So Inho asked the sergeant to get several beaks to them, because this guy definitely exceeded him in physical power. He himself was not very strong, so the help of the sergeant would come in handy. Feeling that they rely on him and that he was not useless, Jehek almost burst into tears. And then grabbing his hand, Inho said that he would do everything. At least 100 pieces would bring. 3 times it will be, the athlete answered him. The reaction of the young sergeant was too excessive. but it was pleasant to see that faith return to his own strength. They also needed sticks, said In-ho, and looked around in search of useful. And at this moment, the system told them that the successful completion of the mission increases the degree of synchronization. Now they have become available to a low-level mobile counter, something like a store. It was easy to find this in games, the opportunity to buy valuable and useful artifacts for start. Chain also gained access to the store, so unexpectedly even cried out. One by one, people received notifications and perked up. The latter has not yet received notifications, the most shouting and restless guy. But so he came into excitement, having received his own, so he screamed with joy. Things proposed by the store were not very good. In-ho examined the old sword, whose blade was full of prizes. All kinds of roots, and even armor of leaves. There were quite a lot of goods. It was possible to buy restorative potions by paying them with bonus glasses. They were inside the game currency. I immediately understood In-ho. The guy in the cap began to be indignant that everything was available for bonuses. Many did not receive points at all. The athlete went a whole 1,000, and he thought about how to spend them. The weapon was a paramount goal, only the store offered a junk. Chain also thought about what could be useful to her in this situation. She immediately realized that only a useless trash could be purchased for glasses. Jae-hyuk could not buy even such junk for his glasses. He received only 200 points, and was very saddened by this. The girl got 500. For 200 points, only a broken sword was available, the sergeant said upset. And this attracted the attention of In-ho. Now he found what was needed, and grinned rather than attracted the attention of the rest. This sword was the most useful thing in their situation, although in fact it was a hilt with a fragment of the blade. However, for the athlete, this was an object that only he could take advantage of. He did not even know that at that moment he was closely watching the restless guy whose boy he had previously saved. Trinity friends calmly discussed their pressing problems. Jae-hyuk asked the elder if he found something in the store, and In-ho answered that the broken sword that the sergeant found will buy. Chain noted that the fragment in length is equal to its knife, and it can be used as a throwing weapon. But after thinking, the athlete abandoned this idea. A broken sword was much heavier. The blade is broken, its blade is dull, the metal itself is soft. In-ho was going to use only the handle. That part of the product that was intended for safe grip and had a guard. Even if he managed to make a blade from a monster's beak, it could hardly be held with a bare hand. Initially, he planned to use a split stick, but now they had this item. And then they noticed the guy that all this time was standing behind In-ho. He, without any ceremony, approached his athlete face to face. With a conspiratorial tone, he asked the athlete whether he always knew how to fight like that. His face was so close that In-ho felt the breath of this strange man. But it turned out that he was just delighted with the missiva that the athlete arranged, and began to wave his hands to say how cool it was. In-ho frowned. He did not notice the approach of danger at all. Jae-hyuk also began to push and screamed on a stranger whom no one called. But In-ho stopped him, asked what the guy meant. A strange man in a cap cursed with annoyance. But then he again showed his finger up, saying that everything was cool. Chain almost burst out laughing from such childishness. The stranger slapped In-ho on the shoulder, as if they were old friends. And he continued to admire them, because the athlete dealt with everyone alone. So he should have given a bunch of bonus glasses, he shouted. This is exactly what was the subject of his burning curiosity. He wanted to know that In-ho bought his glasses for these single-handed. Their noisy conversation attracted the other survivors, who looked suspiciously at the one who broke off so much from them. This athlete hides something, or maybe he is the henchman of that girl, they whispered aside, casting unkind glances at him. Chain tried to sniff them, because In-ho risked his life to save everyone. The athlete thought for a moment. He really stood out too much against the rest of the rest. If we also create a weapon, then he decided even more suspicions, and at that moment Jae-hyuk grabbed a talker by the hand and easily removed the elder from the shoulder. The guy in the cap immediately grimaced. The sergeant squeezed him as if he took it into ticks. And then he explained to the talker that it was necessary to behave quieter, and then he would live longer. And for more convincing, he squeezed his hand so that the talker screamed in pain. Tearing his hand, the talker immediately retired away from Sin. Jae-hyuk immediately transferred the topic to the beaks of monsters, and he suggested gathering them quietly and go to another place so as not to attract attention. In-ho also in a whisper agreed with him. Chain agreed to leave, but at first she also had to look somewhere. At first they did not understand what was the matter, and then they were horrified. All this time, the girl was devoid of comfortable shoes from which she rubbed her legs. The suspicious Jae-hyuk was immediately disturbed and asked her to stick a patch. Chain confidently stated that it was just a scratch, even if she causes discomfort. In-ho handed her a patch and told the girl that she should have said about it before. On this, she only grinned kindly. All this time, In-ho also answered her that everything was in order, and they both smiled at each other. Jae-hyuk, meanwhile, got a little food, since the devices still worked. Rice triangles of sandwiches, noodles and drinks were removed from the refrigerator of the company. After lunch, Chain tried to contact her brother, but of course the call did not pass. Inho even had no one to call, so he carefully watched his comrades. Chain grabbed her head and wondered which had no time before, how long they have been here. Jaekek was also gloomy, until recently it seemed to them that they were about to get out of here. And now it was not clear whether they could survive and get out of here at all. While they were fulfilling the missions, he checked all the outputs. It was impossible to get out of the building as if the building was surrounded by an invisible wall, he thought Inho opening the soda. As before, it was impossible to leave the exhibition hall in a mission with monsters. So the mission in this area has not yet ended, the athlete concluded. Or maybe something similar happens outside the building. Then they again received a system message. The next mission will begin tomorrow at 9 in the morning. Please get ready, melted a metal voice, and Inho frowned. It is amazing that the next mission will be the next day, said Chain when they looked at each other. But this gave them the opportunity to relax properly. The clock showed 6, which means they had another 15 hours for sleep and rest. At night, he dreamed of a nightmare, as if some dead man was pursuing him and screaming his name. He heard the grinding of his teeth about the bones and the vile champagne when the dead man approached him. The ragged mouth was so close that he felt a fetid breath. The voice called him again and again, and finally, the athlete was able to open his eyes. He realized that everything that happened was a nightmare. Rushing his hands with a tired face to drive away a nap that suddenly fell on him, the guy returned to work. He used petrification and acceleration. And then he began to quickly polish the blade of a home-made sword. It was necessary to act quickly until they returned. 5 hours ago, he approved the purchase of a broken sword. Thanks to the inventory, the artifact could be hidden and extracted at any time. Before that, Inho asked the sergeant to disassemble the handle by pulling out the fragment of the blade. He had gloves because Jaekek grabbed the blade without fear and tensed that there was strength. He even growled to give up the full and blushed from the strangle. And finally, he managed to divide the sealed handle with rough power. After Inho, I used 3 points that I received as a reward for the mission to improve the skill of petrification. Thanks to this, he strengthened his hand and could easily crush a fragile blade with his palm. The athlete asked his friends to inspect the entire building and find as many basic necessities in larger bags as possible. And while he himself decided to make weapons from the beaks of monsters. 5 hours later, he managed to make one test and how to sharpen it. As it was expected, it was not easy, and now Inho had a hand and shoulder. The blade turned out to be sharp as a razor with a thin edge, great for unaroused targets. This success was even marked by the system, and he was given an achievement, sharpening of weapons with his bare hands. So he became a man of a sharpener when performing non-standard actions. The system awarded him the title. Thanks to this, his understanding of sharpening and its speed increased significantly. After some time, Jaekek and Chain returned to him. They coughed from thick dust around. Although they broke up in this place, now they did not understand where such smoke came from. Nearby stood a sofa cut like a wall behind. There were traces of the cuts around, so Chain thought that someone attacked their leader before they were not there. Therefore, she began to scream loudly and call him by name. Jaekek joined the girl. Together they could not see anything. And then they heard a voice from smoke. Inho informed them that he was there. He cut a thick fog by a sharp wave of his weapon, as if he was from Vada. And then they saw his formidable appearance. Inho looked like a real master of the sword. Friends cried out admiringly and asked what it was in his hands. The athlete praised them for a good job, and he presented everyone with personally in his hands 2 elven T-Sex. The system recognized them as a sword from Kleshnekleuv on a simple handle. The connection was careless, but the sharpening of these knives was excellent. Jaekek was very delighted with this gift because his elder made him himself. Was there something that their leader could not, he said, grinning. It was a good job as a newcomer. Chain also admired the blade. He was light and lay well in his hand. Therefore, Inho praised his skillful hands and smiled sweetly. The athlete also winked at the girl and said that she could call his man a grinder and showed his palm. Now the sergeant realized that all the furniture on which one could sleep was spoiled by their leader, who decided to try his own product. It easily had to rip off the bodies of monsters, and possibly people, Inho thought gloomily. He asked his comrades whether they managed to find something useful, and Chain said that they filled a whole bag of food from the buffet. Looking for a while, I saw that only an hour was left before the mission. Having collected all the belongings in the backpacks, they decided to go down to the lobby in advance. It turned out that the rest of the survivors already there and waited for them. Trinity felt uncomfortable because she did not know whether they could trust people. Jaekek gazed at the chatterbox in the cap that was pestering them before, and then crossing his arms over his chest, looked at him with a meaning, from which he immediately cringed, realizing what was inferior in force. After that, everyone patiently waited for the barrier to disappear. He surrounded the entire office building entirely and did not allow them to go outside. At the appointed time, the system told them that the survivors should get to the specified point. They had 10 minutes about everything, so it was necessary to immediately go there. The zone was located at the Seoul station, but what is happening outside asked the question of Inho. As it was assumed, they were alone under the test, and after looking at the map they saw that the whole city in terrifying ruins. Turning to all, Inho said to advance and not lose time. When they went outside, they cringed with horror. The air was filled with the smell of burning and iron. Everywhere there were traces of the disaster that took the lives of many people. Their path lay straight to the station, without unnecessary stops. But still they had to go around the rubble and blazing conflagrations. To catch the survivors on time, switch to run. Fortunately, the safe zone already seemed ahead. However, some have already taken a place for themselves. This man resembled more homeless. Inho immediately began to study it. Each survivor obviously went through the game for survival, and the fact that he was left alone alarming. The station looked practically not touched compared to other buildings. Other people, a middle-aged man who carried his frightened daughter in their arms, and 3 senior schoolgirls, pulled up to the zone. The girl looked 5 years old, and she from all her small forces held onto her father's neck. So the surviving several zones met and wary examined each other. 13 of their zone, 1 tramp and 6 more, counted all Inho. At the appointed time, they received a message from the system. For the next task, everyone should work together. This news surprised everyone. Before that, the task was strictly based on competition. In such a task, it was important to choose the right team, Chain noted. So the level of alertness to each other has only grown. In this task, they will be divided into teams. Those who cannot cope with the task in each of the 3 rounds will be eliminated, the system again reported. The girls of schoolgirls cringed. They hoped so that when they reached the nightmare to end, but the task continued. Some guy in glasses grabbed his head with despair. Failure to fulfill the goals of the assignment means the death of the entire team. This created tremendous pressure on all and could affect their survival. A group of individuals isolated in space is assigned the status of a separate team, the system again reported. A number appeared above the heads of the survivors. The talker in the cap that was next to the Inho group also received the first issue like them and was incredibly happy. They were connected by light lines under their feet. So 20 people divided into 5 teams, depending on who stood, but they still did not know about the goals of the mission. There were also dissatisfied who wanted to change the team. The distribution was unfair because even a child who did not have survival skills took into account. There were only 3 of them in the team. A guy with glasses shouted, demanding justice in the world that went crazy. But he could be understood. The system was inhuman and cruel. They still had a child or an adult. If there is no result, you are removed. The guard with a shield in his hand tried to reassure the woman of the rose because in their detachment there was a girl with a sword, but she kept behind her head. Further, the system told them that the results of everyone will be displayed in a special rating. 5 points give for each killed enemy. There are 500 of them. The thing was like a school rating, and the schoolgirls did not like it. One of the girls was very scared, but her brisk friend with a stick in her hand comfortably said that they just needed to try as yesterday. But the problem was in that strange silent person that was like a homeless man. The time has come to prepare for a fight with an unknown enemy, and the Inho team called on their weapons from the inventory. The guy in the cap was surprised that they could think that this was a special ability accessible to everyone. He extended his hand and repeated the word call, but nothing happened. This somewhat discouraged him, and then the system reported that the eye would be activated. A huge red eye appeared above them again, which was spying from a crack in space. During the allotted time, they had to destroy as many enemies as possible, but in the first seconds, no one was visible. To better defend himself, the 5th team becomes back to the back. But then they saw a girl in dirty torn clothes that moved strangely. Schoolgirl girls were horrified by this spectacle. Chain recognized this girl. It was the deputy head of the Yun department. They were familiar quite a bit, and Chain squinted to consider it properly. And then she closed her mouth so as not to scream too loudly. A second later, they were already surrounded by a whole crowd of staggering people. All of the baiji of their companies were at all, although everyone knew for sure that none of these employees survived the restructuring. But now they were in a terrifying half of the decomposed dead. The schoolgirl whispered in horror so that the monsters did not approach her. And when one of them rushed to her, she screamed away and tightened the stick in her hands tightly, completely squinting. She saved her homeless whom they were so afraid of. With the blow of a knife in the back of his head, he eliminated the zombies. And then one more that rushed at him. The eyes of the homeless sparkled with madness, as if he had a pleasure from it. Jahek was amazed at his power, capable of crushing the skull with his bare hands. But it is one thing to be strong, another thing to destroy the zombies without hesitation. From this man, it was in danger I felt Inho. The zombies continued to rush thoughtlessly at the survivors, threatening to crush in number. The homeless brought down all his power on them and destroyed the skulls with bare fists. One of the girls rushed to her girlfriend, who was called by Heldon. While the homeless fought, she leaned toward her to check whether everything was in order. But she herself did not notice how another enemy sneaked up to them. Fortunately for them, they saved Inho by testing his sword in business. He chopped off the zombies with one blow. He ordered the girls to pull themselves together if they did not want to die here, and he prepared to accept the battle. The three of them easily dealt with unarmed dead. Their swords did their job well. Inho walked in front, and the chain and Jihek covered him. As soon as they dealt with one group of rotten, as another group of overtime victims had already fled to them. The homeless was breathing heavily, but continued to fight in complete surroundings without showing signs of panic. Is it possible to kill these zombies at all? The guy in the cap was surprised. Looking closely, he noticed that there were, and those who could no longer rise, which means there was a special condition. This time, Ino himself did not know what to do. Their glasses did not change, which means they did not count the murders to anyone. But then he saw a strange shine and applied acceleration to properly consider it. Inho fearlessly jumped directly into the crowd of enemies. There was clearly something there. A thin silver thread came from the head of every dead man. Grabbing one of the threads, the athlete pulled her, and then a small, toothy creature appeared on the back of one of the dead. It was like a parasite worm, and it looked vile. The blow of the sword of Inho cut the parasite until he disappeared in another body. He did not notice how the action of the skill acceleration ended, and if not for the chain he had become a zombie. The girl screamed warningly, and quickly cut the worm that flew to their leader. Jekek finished off the remnants on Earth, crushing them with his boot. Only then did the system announce that the divided parasitic worm was destroyed. Inho himself looked frightened more than ever before. Now it was clear that these monsters controlled the bodies of the dead, turning them into zombies. Everyone saw that only after this statistics of glasses changed. Inho told everyone about his discovery that it was necessary to look for silver threads in the back of the head, for which to hold on to parasites. With this, they quickly destroyed the wave of zombies. According to the results of this round, the first team took first place. Inho was on the second with his friends. In general, everyone coped. Until the end of the round, there were 3 minutes left. The time was running out, and the team of the guard and another girl was in a hurry to level the score. Others also tried their best. Inho quickly examined the entire battlefield and realized that there was not enough time. The girl's father moved with her in her arms and was very tired. He was shouted to leave her, otherwise everyone would die. Then Inho applied acceleration. He was disgusting to hear such proposals. They were in the middle of a brutal game, and the system forced to play it. With dexterous movements, the athlete caught several worms, and then he ran to a lagging team with a child. Those did not even notice him. Only the girl saw worms under her feet. Inho ordered them to simply slam, without unnecessary persuasion, and then he asked Chain to help the third team, so he decided to align the chances of everyone. He sent Jehek to the second. The guy in the cap asked what to do to him, but since he had neither weapons nor his abilities, ordered him to look after the girl. Inho hated the system that forced them to competition and decided to make it all survived. He was firmly intended to make the creators of this game stopped her themselves, deciding that she was meaningless. Having distributed the roles, their team began to help the others. They followed their leader without unnecessary questions, considering it natural. But there were no signs of happiness on the face of a stray tramp from this. He looked like someone interrupted his entertainment. To take an anger on someone, he grabbed one of the schoolgirls. She grimaced in pain because his grip was steel. The homeless twisted her hand in the joint and shouted why she was staring at him, because he was a weakness. He asked some kind of nonsense. One of the girls hit him on the back of the head with a stick and asked why he did this because they are in the same team. Then Grubian threw his victim aside and turned to the defender. The mission ended, and the schoolgirl in horror stared at this terrible person. At this time, the system completed the calculation of the points of the first round. After everyone scored 100 points, no one was restructured, so Inho was happy. The homeless muttered something inaudible under his breath. Father joyfully hugged his daughter. They managed to survive, although they had already lost hope. Jehek praised his elder because he saved everyone, to which the athlete noted that this was their common merit. And then he saw how the homeless viciously stared at schoolgirls from his team. His eyes were glazed as if he was about to kill the girls. As soon as they figured out the first wave as the second began, these zombies fled even faster than the previous ones. Inho shouted to everyone that they gathered. The system did not even let them rest. In the second round, they moved more harmoniously because they already knew what they were faced with. The main threat came from the number of monsters. Inho looked at the streaming table of their results. He still watched that there were no lagging behind. Glasses were scored evenly, and with their speed of problems should not have arisen. However, then the guard felt the heat near him, and turning around, he saw a blazing hand. In horror, he closed his face with his hands, thinking that the homeless tramp was set on fire. He himself looked at his hand in surprise, as if he had not experienced any heat. He was elected as expected, muttered the homeless, finally losing his mind. He waved his hands with blazing fire, and Inho realized that this dangerous person had just received a skill and became even more dangerous. The homeless directed the fire to the crowd of opponents, and they simultaneously lit up as if they had been watered with gasoline. The madman arranged real dances with fire, enjoying the sight that he arranged. The incredible power that he received thanks to the strongest desires imprisoned inside him, Inho thought. This man should be afraid. His power increased many times, and the intentions were not completely clear. A few moments before the second round ended, the madman approached with a terrible view of one of the schoolgirls. And he grabbed her by the throat. With one hand, he was able to raise her above the ground and asked what she was so staring at him. Girlfriend shouted that he would let her go, but the madman did not listen. And then he applied his terrible skill on her, and the girl screamed. After that, the bastard threw her away, like a toy. A schoolgirl with a short haircut fell to her knees from a sense of his own powerlessness and fear. However, according to the results of this round, the third team was left because she did not manage to score the right number of points. The madman burned those whom they were supposed to kill. It was pointless to be indignant. The system did not know pity and began to wash them one by one. The homeless said 2 birds with 1 stone and quietly laughed at a crazy laughter. The survivors froze in horror, understanding how dangerous this person is. He did it because of the results, or maybe he just wanted to kill. In any case, he could not ignore him, understood Inho. The schoolgirl who lost her friend could not believe in what had happened and lost her strength. She grabbed her charred body with her own hands and pressed him to her. Inho threw his bag on the floor and asked everyone to get together. They needed to prepare for the next round. The system told them that the best team would be given a special reward. This aroused the indignation of others, because earlier this was not about. At such a pace, the gap between the teams will only grow to increase. Moreover, the winner of this round has become a very strong madman. For this, his team was awarded 2 points of skills that he put into his flame. And in the next round, the winner will receive 3, the system said. The temperature became even hotter, Jekek noted. Yes, and the radius became more, noted the cups of nervous. Inho told them not to be nervous and act according to plan. He took out some kind of bottle and ordered everyone to take positions. Another crowd of zombies rushed to the surviving with empty, evil faces. The team also went to the monsters to meet, with swords. Jehek walked ahead. He was protected by armor, and he could cover others without unnecessary risk. Using the acceleration of Inho collected worms, and then he threw them chained to deal with them. With dexterous movements, the girl cut parasites directly in the air. Following grabbing the can, and the lighter began to act in the cap. He burned the worms, from which they writhed like in a pan. Now their team quickly escaped forward, leaving the rest behind. It was a good result for the athlete. They acted according to the scheme of a clear division of labor, and the total synergy increased. The essence was that if you burn the dissected worm, then more points were given for it, considering it for 2. Meanwhile, a desperate father told his girl to stay near him, but did not notice how she disappeared. Having discovered the loss, he began to look around in a panic. But fortunately, the guy in the cap from the Inho team looked after her, and now the man could take hunting. He was even lent a spray can with combustible aerosol. The talker winked at Dad, although a girl named Yule was noticeably nervous. Jehek asked the elder how he guessed to use this method, and he replied that when he studied the results of the first round, he realized that they were strange. Their team ended with 101 points because the first worm was cut in half. The madman that remained alone looked anxiously at the scale of the glasses. Chain grinned with satisfaction and thought how lucky they were with the leader. The madman only muttered that he was chosen because the system chose him, so why he was not in the first place, and viciously looked at his opponent with a skewed face. A bright flame flared up in his hands again, threatening to burn everyone to the ground. Having gritted his fists, the madman began to hiss and swear like a wild cat. He promised to kill everyone and screamed around the whole city, and then he rushed to Inho as he considered him his main rival. But then a brave schoolgirl in the hands of which was a bottle appeared in his way. But the homeless managed to react and simply broke an empty bottle with his fiery fist. Shards sprinkled, and the madman promised to send a schoolgirl after a friend. Everything was lit by a bright flash of flame. Because of the smoke, they both disappeared from visibility. In the last second, Inho managed to save the schoolgirl and closed it with his body, but his shoulder was badly damaged. All this time, the athlete adhered to a plan according to which the probability of winning was maximum, but this was prevented. Chain rushed to help him, because the clothes on Inho were still burning. She invited him to recover with the help of a mission, because he received a severe burn. But then the schoolgirl promised to cure him, and in return he should eliminate this vile killer. With tears in her eyes, she asked if he could do it. But when her hands touched his shoulder, Inho realized that the schoolgirl was not joking. They were seized with light. And after the system said that thanks to the skill of the healer Young Sora, his wounds healed. Pretty quickly a strong burn was completely dragged out. And before Jehek managed to run to his elder, the wound completely disappeared. But for a schoolgirl girl, it was the limit of her abilities. The skill had a low level. All the same, Inho thanked her and gently stroked her head. The rest can be cured later, he said, and asked her confirmation. The schoolgirl nodded resolutely and replied that she would try. Now Inho could again turn to his enemy. He already realized that the homeless was left-handed. This meant that his skill worked only on his left hand. The athlete called on petrification. His plan was easy: to invest 3 points for the third round in his hand, and then apply acceleration from which no one is defended. Although the homeless was strong, But when he was caught with a stone hand and they began to twist the joints, he could not do anything. Interestingly, I asked him Inho whether he could use his skill if you break this hand, and smoked maliciously. And then the whole world swam before the eyes of a homeless madman. He thought that everyone abandoned him, and therefore he burned people and the dead. Father beat him every day and said that he looked like a fled mother. The madman liked to look at how they all burn in the fire. After he served the time, he simply wandered, secretly burning garbage. And suddenly one day a revelation descended on him. The apocalypse began, and then it became chosen. Based on the deeply rooted memories of the fire and ash, the skill was created. Then this madman experienced incredible happiness. He realized that it was not for nothing that he considered himself the elect. In this doomed world, he was destined to burn everything. Only this is why his hand unnaturally twisted behind him and explodes with pain. The madman screamed with this pain, and Inho let him go. Now his left hand was broken and the madman ceased to be dangerous. To complete the defeat, the athlete drove him with a stone fist. It feels like getting a brick. The tramp was poorly held by the blow, so he immediately swam and staggered back. He wanted to use the skill, but because of the broken wrist he could not do this. And then the athlete approached him close and asked to grit his teeth. Using acceleration, he brought down a hail of blows on a defenseless madman. Everyone was like a hammer blow, so here he was, not good. The tramp recouched and began to beg to stop. He fell to his knees and began to ask for mercy with broken lips. Demonstrative violence should not be continued, Incho decided. He remembered that he was watched by the innocent eyes of the schoolgirl. Harona stuck on the progress of this test. She realized that she was too careless and hit the table with her fist. Now it became clear that two people opened their skills at once, and she decided to finish everything quickly. The schoolgirl breathed heavily, squeezing a broken bottle in her hands, and the homeless lay unconscious at her feet. Tears flowed from the girl's eyes. All this could not return the killed girlfriend. But in this case, it was possible to put an end to. Her friend hurried to her help. Together they hugged and began to cry, so the schoolgirl was able to take a head of his own hands. This was enough for Inho, so he smiled with relief. But then he was clouded in his eyes. Despite the strengthening, even his stone armor could not stand it, and one of the fingers was broken. Then the girl healer approached him and laid her palms on his wounded hand. Thanks to her, the hand was quickly restored, this time completely. Inho squeezed several times and unclenched his fist to make sure of this. His friends were also delighted with such a recovery. The ability of this schoolgirl was amazing. Well, they had to spend a reward for the mission for treatment. In general, the girl looked good despite the shock and fatigue from the use of the skill. The athlete thanked the girl for the treatment, and she replied that she had fulfilled her promise. At the same moment, Inho received a message that one observer liked his act. To his dissatisfaction, Heron realized that Inho annoying her had just received a sponsor. The thing is that the process of restructuring was broadcast in real time through the eyes, and observers constantly reward their favorites, which has become commonplace. But in the 13th district, the restructuring process has just begun, and there were no official elected ones, Heron thought. Her assistant was indignant at Cho, because in the leadership it was unequivocally forbidden to transfer rewards to the not yet elected candidates. But then she simply dismissed everything from everything, because it was not a fully sponsorship, but just a gift, although her servant warned that she could be reprimanded. Inho, meanwhile, was surprised to consider a strange message about an anonymous gift. A small bundle with a red envelope on top appeared in front of him. His team crowded around him and stared with curiosity at this thing. The restless guy in the cap was the first to try to grab a bundle, but his hand passed through him. Jahek shouted at him, and he was justified by the fact that he was thinking this reward for the mission, although only their leader received it. Then the athlete explained to everyone that this is a gift and not a reward, which greatly expanded everyone's ideas about the system. Inho did not know the details, but behind everything stood someone who was following them through a huge eye. He rose right above them, closing part of the sky with its size. Jahek suggested, despite all the suspicions, to open a gift anyway. Inho agreed, but extending his hand, he suddenly received a shock and retired his hand. Everything was in order, just a bundle, he explained to his friends. A bubble with the essence of lightning appeared from the bundle. The instructions said that this oil from the old wood melted with lightning. If it was applied to the weapon, it provoked an electric shock. The amount of use is limited by 10. This artifact looked strong, and the comrades liked it. But at the same time, he was quite dangerous, because he constantly fought the current. Only a thin bottle restrained this explosive mixture. Inho took out his blade from the inventory. Jahek suggested looking for rubber gloves, but refused the elder. He had something better. Petrification protected him from both fire and electricity. Jahek also remembered the insulating properties of ordinary stone. Inho inflicted the essence on the sword, and thus improved it, created the skill of current, which is charged for one application. From sparkling charges, the hair on his hand stood on end, but the whole undertaking came to the taste. Friends were looking forward to experiencing this miracle gun and seeing its power in the case, whether it would be more powerful than the stamper. In-ho with a smile answered them that it is not worth counting on something special, and the number of blows is equal to 10, and it can only be used along with the petrification, or you yourself will fall under the blow. The ruthless voice of the system mentioned to all souls surviving in this area that the next mission will begin at 1 in the afternoon. As before, no one was going to give them a lot of time to relax. Almost immediately, a new safe zone was created that they saw on their maps. In-ho easily learned to train in this, one of the many that usually arrives and decrease from the station. He shouted to everyone that he needed to run to the platforms. Most likely the zone was there. The system gave them only 5 minutes to get to the train, as always ruthlessly. The athlete cut off the dissatisfied murmur of the survivors and ordered them to flee without further words. They moved in short dashes so as not to get lost and not get off their feet. Inko was looking for them to the path while they were waiting for the lagging behind so that no one was dead. When the route was laid, the athlete led everyone again. Of the entire train, there was only one car with a safe zone. Fortunately, they had already reached the desired platform, but then he was stopped by the chain who thought that they needed to move in the opposite direction. They again checked with the map. It was necessary to understand where the 18th car was located. Inho thought that he was at the end of the train on the right. But then Jekek joined the discussion and asked if the last car. It turned out that they received different coordinates of a safe zone, who at the beginning at the end of the train. Instead of a common, everyone had an individual mission, realized Inho and got nervous. 1 minute was left. 10 seconds before the deadline, Inho managed to run to the last train car. Now their entire friendly team was divided. The observer's eye even made his way inside the train and watched him intently. A monster demon Tokubi with a huge club got out of the brakes. He was the next purpose. The system gave 3 attempts to destroy it. The first monster looked rather dangerous, so the athlete thought to use the recently acquired skill on it, and at the same time check it. First of all, Inho applied petition on his fist, turning it into an indestructible sledgehammer. And then he called his sword, the stun gunner that beat lightning in all directions. Seeing this weapon, an ugly one-eyed demon growled in fright. The scream was so piercing that the guy almost squeezed the eardrums. The scream was very confusing, so the athlete decided to quickly deal with the demon with the help of acceleration. However, when he tried to activate the skill, nothing happened. Having tied 1 to 1, he realized that the demon roar turned off the abilities that require the word call. He was still lucky that he called the sword before. Without acceleration will be more difficult, but what is already there, the guy thought. The demon was again ahead of him and attacked him first, striking a heavy steel club. Stretching all the muscles on the body of Inho had to hastily evade to the side. He was again lucky that a large demon was not moving as fast as it first seemed. Therefore, when he landed, he was able to immediately strike with a lightning, simply touch the monster with a blade. In an instant, the demon was destroyed, and the system said that the 18th car was clean. Inho looked at his thunderous blade with satisfaction. His discharge was very powerful, although he was a consumable. Its only drawback is that it is also necessary to use petrification, but for such power, it is a fair restriction. Looking at the door leading to the next car, the guy thought if the rest would cope with his enemy. After all, one of the survivors was a girl who was unlikely to show at least some resistance. All this time, his eyes were closely watching him. However, at the same moment, the system reported that the mission was failed. Inho was confused, not understanding that he had already done wrong and for what he was appointed. Choi asked his mistress why she was doing this, if he herself said that the donation was just a trifle. Corona dismissed him, answering that she had never said that. The girl was furious. She hoped that the survivor would store her gift for later, when she became stronger as usual, and did. But the assistant immediately objected to her that it makes no sense to protect what you can use, and this even more angry his boss. Takubi's plump mouth is a sworn enemy of those who rely solely on skills. This demon should have been a punishment for the damned survivor. All who are outside the safe zone are subject to destruction. As a fine for the failure of the mission, Tokebi evolves the system. Right in the eyes of Inho, the monster became more and stronger. The guy was thinking hard. As soon as the monster appeared, they said that they had 3 attempts, and safe zones were divided into wagons. He accurately completed the mission in his car. The 18th had to be passed. Inho used acceleration and swept past the demon by hitting it with a lightning category. The 18th car was again passed, and the guy realized that he had too little time to help the others. For the success of the mission, you need to go through the whole train at a time, Heron said, and realized that Inho had already guessed about it. Choi agreed with her. This survivor was different from the others as they thought, and the servant was worried that the higher management would be known about this. But Heron only dismissed as they know, she asked. But there was definitely the question of the bias of the observers, objected to Chivi. The Raven from the delivery service is delighted with the ability of Inho to use artifacts, and such messages fell to him on the screen of observers with amazing their violent reaction. The number of observers for Inho exceeded the permissible limit, and the system invited Heron to improve it. Choi was amazed at this. Is his mistress really use his glasses right now? Heron nodded in the affirmative and smiled, despite the objections of Choi that this person could not destroy all the monsters on the train. After all, everything was no more than 10 minutes about everything, so he ran at all speed to the beginning of the train. He had to kill all the monsters and return to the beginning of the train. Putting him in such a difficult situation, Hirona watched the guy throwing with great pleasure. The observer's eye was improved to the second level. Heron decided not to skimp on the expense once everything went so well. She will receive a reward at any cost, so the administrator thought that she watched everything with a crazy grin. Inko quickly reached the 17th carriage and got off with its inhabitant. It was a dangerous battle because when he saw his monster managed to throw his gun into him. When everything subsided, Inko felt someone pulled his hand, and turning around, he saw a little girl from their group. All this time she was here and hid, just a miracle that she was not found. Having examined the car in general, Inho was surprised how it was possible. He was completely visible. It was not clear how the child could hide here for so long. After that, the guy hid the girl in the toilet between the wagons, promising that he would return for her. And he himself began to clean the car behind the car, killing Tokebi there with a thunderblade. There was little time left. It was necessary to somehow go through the whole sector, and the athlete thought intensely on it. In the toilet of the 15th car, he found a talker in a cap. He sat hugging his knees and cried. The talker was justified by the fact that the task was to return to its zone on time. But Inho needed a way to go through the whole sector alone. The talker carefully looked out of the toilet thinking that it was all over. But this was not so. The athlete told him to buy weapons in the store and not hide here. In the third round, the talker should deal with the enemy as quickly as possible and help him. The athlete told him the 15th wagon. And before he began to resent, Inho applied acceleration and pulled on. In the next carriage, he saw someone fighting Takubi face to face. Whether it was from the accounting department, she fought with a sword that she received randomly at the very beginning. It was not clear why she closed her eyes, thought Inho when he slipped past. He killed the monster and said Yeji that she could rise and open her eyes. The 14th car was passed. The girl struck him dumbfounded at him, not understanding where he could get here. The athlete told her the next time to open her eyes wider and stab a monster in her heart or to the eye. If he continues to move at this pace, he hardly has time to get to the 4th, the athlete wondered. Yeji asked him this end of the mission. The monster was killed once, but the guy upset the girl, saying that the task would be completed if you kill all the monsters in all wagons. Yeti realized that she would have to kill another of these terrible monsters. The girl was immediately in spirit. This time she was saved, but what will happen next time? Inho sharply asked her, is she not grateful to him for the salvation? Then she must lend his sword, said the guy, and looked strictly at the girl. The thunderous sword has 6 charges left, and they cannot be used without petrification. The rest of Inho wagons had to go with an ordinary sword. In the 13th car, he met the girl a healer. She told him how she tried to contact someone, but to no avail. Inho wanted to transmit a message to those who were at the beginning of the train. He reached only the 13th car. If everything goes smoothly, then everything will be like in the relay. People in the head of the train need to move forward and pass 4 cars. It would be enough to give them one message so that they move forward and help the neighbors. The schoolgirl was surprised because it is unlikely that anyone alone will be able to kill a strong monster. And then Inho received a message that his eyes were improved to the 2nd level. He looked at the roof of the car, where a terrible something spying on him through the gap in space. It turned out that only he sees this eye. The schoolgirl saw nothing. Now the guy had a connection with observers, albeit limited, and his synchronization increased. The darkness that surrounded them retreated and became light again. A flying eyeball appeared in the air, which surprised Inho. Pointing to him, he asked Soru whether she saw this eyeball, but the result was the same. Following the athlete, a hail of issues from all kinds of observers who were interested in how he would be twisted. There's only a couple of minutes left. Now more than ever, he needed a connection with everyone. Now they could not even send notes in suites in the cinema, Sora suddenly said. And then Inho dawned on a strange idea. Chain touched his ears. A warm liquid flowed from them. Having gritted her fist, she told herself that all this is trifles compared to how their leader fought with burns on his hand. But the question remained unresolved. She had already killed one monster, but then a message appeared about the failure of the mission and Tokebi revived. Inho would definitely find a pattern if he had only been here, the girl thought regretfully. The first thing would probably be dealt with this monster. Without hesitation, the chain threw the knife right into the demon. The dagger struck the demon through, but at the same moment the system reported the failure of the mission. Chain slowly rose to her feet and returned her knife. A fine was assigned for failure to fulfill the mission, and this plunged it into despair. In the space of the car, a hole appeared again through which a monster penetrated here. To transmit the message, it was necessary to just make a gift to another survivor and attach a commentary to him. So Inho was able to inform everyone about the tasks in this mission. Observers liked how he used a gift system. After reading the response in the gift from Jehek Inho, I realized that there is a restriction on the number of characters, which means you need to be brief. Soon the last round began and the great Takabe appeared, which this time had to be destroyed at all costs. Inho used petrification and called on a thunderous blade to deal with the first monster quickly. He has only half of the charges left, but if they die, it does not make sense to store them, so the guy boldly used the gift. In the 17th car, acceleration had to be used. Alternating skills and equipment, he managed to go to the 14th in a few minutes, so he could use all the skills that observers really liked. Having finished with the monster, the guy received a gift from the chain and said to read it. She had already passed from the first car to the third, promised to reach the sixth and return. This gave the athlete the hope that he would have time to complete everything on time. But then everything did not go so well. In the 10th and 11th wagon, the participants failed to survive. The observers closed with their tongue displeasedly looking at the weaklings. But Inho ordered them to shut up because people do not exist for their entertainment. Their arrogance only angered the athlete more strongly, so that he took all his rage on Tokabe. There was no one in the 7th carriage, but the traces of the battle were on the face. Judging by the destruction, only strong Jehek could leave them. At this time, he helped the father of a girl who was too weak to fight with a demon. And then Inho came to the rescue who killed the enemy with the last electric charge. The 6th car was passed, and the guy was delighted to see his leader. First of all, Inho asked the sergeant if he had seen Chain, but he answered negatively. It was an alarming sign. The girl was going to reach the 6th and return. In the 5th carriage of Chain and a cleaning lady, a monster who grabbed one of the schoolgirls was waiting. This Tokabe had 3 more free hands to threaten them. The schoolgirl screamed in a stifled voice and begged her to save. The cleaning lady immediately panicked, but Chain told them to calm down and promised to save the girl. Jehek wanted to go forward and figure it out, but Inho stopped him. In close space, a long sword was dangerous and the schoolgirl could suffer. The monster knows this. He feels a threat of people, therefore, he uses a schoolgirl as a shield. Unfortunately, the skill has not yet rolled back, so Inho had to get an ordinary sword. He wanted to somehow distract the monster, but then Chain ordered everyone to bother and threw her knife. Inho was frightened that the knife would hit the schoolgirl when Tokabe would cover her. But unexpectedly, the knife trajectory changed and he fell into a big eye on the forehead of the monster. This amazed everyone, even the Chain himself. The demon was defeated. The cleaning lady was the first to run to help the schoolgirl get out of the paws of the demon. After many missions, Chain completed the data calculation and got its skill. The athlete immediately realized what happened, so grabbing the girl by the hand ordered her to remember all the sensations. She was supposed to consolidate all feelings and thoughts at the time of the throw. Only in this way it could be unlocked again. Chain immediately wanted to try, but the athlete told her to wait. The ability had to be reserved until the very end, just in case. A huge eye stared at one survivor from one survivor. There are only 3 minutes left, and the athlete ordered them all more to return to their zones. Everyone was to return to their car, and Inho himself in the very last one. Then Papa Yun caught up with them and detained the athlete. He asked him as his girl, and Inho reassured him, telling him that she was in perfect order, because he was in a wagon neighboring with him. For this, a desperate dad broke in gratitude and promised to compensate everything once. His praises Hanul, and he swore with his name that he would pay for salvation, as if they suddenly ended up in some kind of nightly novel. When Inho returned to the 17th car, he again wondered how the girl remained unnoticed all this time. And again she was nowhere to be visible, although he examined everything. When the guy already wanted to look into the toilet between the wagons, he felt someone held his hands. The girl stood in tears, as if just appeared here, and the guy asked her how she was. He stroked her head to reassure and said that her father was in the front cars. If she wait here until the end of the mission, then the father will come and take her. She nodded, barely restraining herself, but still coped. On this, the mission was completed. Like this selection, the synchronization of all increased slightly. Currently, due to non-standard results, the rating has been recalculated, the system said, and asked to wait. For the murder of almost 3 dozen monsters outside his zone, Inho received the title of Monsters Killer. He was awarded with invulnerability to lower monsters' skills and gave a fat 20% bonus in battles with large opponents. There were ranks of monsters. After each attempt, they became more and more in this task. But then the voice of the system lost and became unstable, as if he was interfering with interference, and the observer's eye trembled. And after he simply disappeared, apparently no one was going to watch the broadcast in the break. Later they got out and examined the destroyed surroundings for useful things. The only plus from the end of the world, you don't have to pay for anything else, so that they occupied the cafe, they arranged a luxurious feast. Inho told them about broadcasting and observers, and Chain told him not to rush and is slow. But the food was too tasty, especially from all the dangers experienced. They ate excellent meat of the highest grade that did not have time to deteriorate in the refrigerator, and the cleaning lady answered for cooking, which had an amazing skill. All this reminded them of a good corporate dinner, ironically, but Inho felt better on it than past times, before the disaster. At dinner, the time has come and the opportunity to get acquainted with everyone. Schoolgirls introduced themselves, the one who was called Ella Jing with a short haircut and the second litter. Inho also introduced himself to them and suggested that they go to high school. The girls were surprised that he understood this so quickly and asked how. There was only one women's school in this area, and healing skills also made thoughts, the athlete explained to them. When dinner was over, the athlete rose and said Chain that it was time to leave. Everyone was surprised that he called only her, and with interest they watched what would happen next. The girl was also surprised, not understanding where he was calling her. Such an invitation was very embarrassed by everyone, so she clarified whether it was really necessary to go only together. Inho, without explaining anything, simply nodded. They had to do self-development. Harona stood beside the gates in the gate building. She was called to the authorities. Inside the premises similar to the church, a man whose height would not allow him to stand here, because even sitting he almost touched the ceiling. Harona spread his ceremonial bow to him because it was its director. He was dissatisfied with the fact that she allowed to sponsor not selected people. Corona boldly stated that it was just a trifling souvenir. Then the director recalled that she personally selected the rules. To this, the manager replied that there was one special participant. He aggressively uses underdeveloped skills and is endowed equally by force and intellect. But the director menacingly interrupted her excuses. She had no right to do so with the not selected. With the help of his strength, reminiscent of sand, he began to strangle Heron. The hand from the sand grabbed her entire fragile body and lifted high into the air. The administrator stood on his own and said that the director himself had to look at him. Mediocrity, the director shouted, only a naive, weak, winged, could take a middle peasant for talent. The 17th, he added, will be so fair. Harona wanted to argue that this is a very dangerous mission of the tasks of which is pushed to murder. But the director only fiercely bulging his eye of the observer, and she no longer dared to argue. T and Inho returned to the train and practiced there in the throwing of the dagger, but there was no result yet. The girl checked the data about her skills several times, but even despite the fact that they returned here no longer changed. Inho analyzed all the details. Train, the power of a throw. They tried everything they could. Then the guy told her to throw the knife into himself. This is the only thing that they had to check the skill in battle. It was unthinkable for the girl to do this because he could suffer. The last time she also threw a live target and not in a chair. Even if this does not work, the guy offered to give up. Chain resolutely stated that she was not going to sit still calmly. She decided to throw a knife, but Inho had to dodge. It was possible not to worry about this thanks to the acceleration. He could easily get away from the throw. As she promised, the throw was perfect. The athlete carefully watched his trajectory slow down. Chain herself was surprised to see everything with her own eyes. But here the system reported that the data necessary to open the skill is going on. So they were on the right track. You need to throw a knife in a live target, and the guy grinned to continue. So they practiced several hours until the measurement stopped at 99%. For final awakening, a special incentive was needed, Inho suggested. Last time, his counter also stopped, and awakening happened when he was on the verge of life and death. The skills are activated in the implementation of special conditions, but the trouble was that it was too dangerous. When they were already returning to the rest, the system told them that the next mission would be tomorrow at 9 in the morning. This reminded them of their work schedule. You come to the beginning, go home in the evening. But the work was unlimited, and for its execution, people were driven into mortal danger and evaluated as goods. It was the worst company possible. After revaluation, Inho received over the highest rank plus, only its status and belonging changed. Some characteristics increased by themselves. After he cured his lameness, knowing how to use the system could even challenge the leadership, the athlete thought. A special bonus was offered to him to make a choice, complete the study or start it. Inho froze in surprise in place. In addition to this, he was given 3 points of awards and 1,500 points. He thought what would happen if you choose one of the doors, whether he will move somewhere to another place. In both cases, he did not know what was waiting for him, and therefore was in no hurry with the choice. I wanted to finish all this restructuring in one fell swoop, but they just started. A little thought out, the guy chose the right door. Chain asked in surprise where he was going, because the room is in the other side. The athlete told her to go forward. Now his turn came. The girl again did not understand what this means, and then the athlete showed her. He put his hand covered with a stone into the door invisible to her, and his hand disappeared into the void. The system opened the door for research. Calling his sword, the athlete promised to return soon when he stepped inside. The system said that he arrived at the training center. There was nothing inside except white empty walls, no matter how much the guy looked back. One of the walls was very similar to a huge screen, and Inho came closer. Then the system invited him to choose an item for study. Low status limited his choice. The choice was offered skills, charismatic leadership, the lessons of omnivorous cooking, basic fencing, with the surprise of Inho found that the monsters could be eaten. But in his conditions where life was constantly in danger, he had to choose only the most useful. Because he chose fencing, armed with his blade, he moved to another room. He was immediately embraced by an oppressive feeling. Thanks to the effect of this audience, the skill will be earned faster. At first, the athlete thought that nothing had changed and everything remained as it was. But then he saw the most obvious and template technique of any training, himself. As if the battle with the same ignoramus could teach him something. Now he became clear lines in the message that the system knows him, was a battle with his full copy. In addition, he was supposed to master the basic techniques, parrying, lunge of a swing, applying each 100 times. A double with black eyes rushed to meet him first. From the first blow, it became clear that his copy was not joking, and the truth was chopping with the intention of killing. MANHUA applied acceleration, but the double instantly reacted and also applied the skill. Their speed became the same, so MANHUA had to reflect the blow of the double with a sword. He seemed to achieve this, because he immediately went to a safe distance. The battle continued, the attack of a counterattack. Their blows did not reach the goal and whistled the air with a whistle. Due to equal speed, the athlete experienced real difficulties. The skills of fencing the double exceeded his own. Anyone would say that this fight was unprofitable for him. But the athlete simply did not know how to give up and was sure that he would win. And then he used the award for the mission, strengthening the petrification and skill of acceleration, in the hope that his copy would not receive the same improvement. The guy grinned and began to wait for his double. They used skills and rushed again to meet each other. Sharp blades collided loudly and sparks flew in all directions. An extensive coating of the hand allowed MANHUA to act more freely and not pay attention to small cuts. The stone played the role of a good shield from sudden attacks. Right during their battle, the system gave a familiar message that new data is being measured to open the skill. Because of this, MANHUA barely managed to reflect the sudden attack of the double. Cracing the sword, he sent him right into the chest of his copy, and then he pierced her through, surprising the double himself. So he first applied the reception of a lunge. Only now he realized that he should not only win, but to master each reception by completing it 100 times. After 7 hours of training, all the goals of this training task were completed, and the guy fell to the ground in complete exhaustion. But he still received the skill of basic fencing of the first level, which was a huge success. This was the first skill that he chose himself. He increased the power of attack by 10 points when using any long sword. In contrast to petrification and acceleration, he did not require the conditions of use. It was not the level of skill that should be increased, but a percentage of skill, distributing free points of characteristics there. Fencing skill opened access to other fencing tree skills. After completing the training, the award was given out and the door appeared that led back. An ordinary person would probably have stopped at his achieved and would definitely go to this door. But MANHUA wanted to get a little more benefit, and despite the strong fatigue attacked the double. The blades collided with force, the doubles repelled his attack. The double struck a powerful blow and almost cut it in two. After a small exchange of blows, the skill of basic fencing increased by 1%, as the MANHUA suggested obtaining the skill, not the end. And thanks to the audience, it was improved faster. Regardless of the lesson, here he could pump faster than outside. With a grin, he invited his double to dance a little more. After he raised the level of basic fencing, the system failed to pump anything else, told him to return through the door. There were no more notifications, which means he achieved everything he could. But before leaving, he decided to ask a question to the double, who he is actually. The black-eyed reflection remained silent, but it seemed a little alerted, as if MANHUA had fallen into the point. The instructor or assistant instructor, someone seems to have decided the guy. Then the double gave a voice and asked how he understood. Too well, the double was owned by his right foot because of the injury. MANHUA could not use it as freely. The habits of past years affected. Despite the fact that he restored his leg, he was still characterized by some kind of clumsiness. Thanks to the smooth movements of the double, MANHUA managed to learn something. For the first time, the object recognized his personality. The double grinned. The athlete also wanted to increase the skill and asked if this is a lesson. Although he reached the maximum of the base class, did not want to pull. It was better to immediately move on to the next stage. The double thought a little and then agreed. He had not had fun for a long time, so he decided to show something. When he clicked his fingers, another door appeared with an elementary class. And the athlete without delay went there, regardless of warnings. Inside there was a forest, real jungle, where unusual plants and herbs grew into human growth and higher. With surprise, MANHUA studied the environment, which was not on Earth. For the first time, he saw that the trunks were also green. The system announced the beginning of a trial lesson, and the guy immediately got acquainted with the goals of the lesson, already understanding how everything was arranged. It was necessary to defeat the rooted enemy in the amount of 100 pieces, 50 moving, and 10 flying. During the passage, he was relied by a reward, a unique skill of fencing, and the title of a swordsman. This lesson could be left ahead of schedule, but then no reward. Without risk, there is no reward, and the guy thought to try. He did not notice how calm stems of plants came in motion next to him. Like a tentacle, they wrapped him with tight vines and lifted him into the air. And then he saw the gaping mouth of the flower, where the vines dragged him and everything squeezed in his chest. The difference in their dimensions was huge. This predatory flower grabbed everything that moves and dragged into his mouth. In addition to the main mouth, he also had additional ones that they strove to bite off a piece. A huge building, and even with mobile stems, this monster turned the task into mockery. In-ho figured out what to do. He was caught like an insect. He was completely helpless. Nearby, a huge beetle was waiting for his turn. The tentacle that was holding him off, and let the bug go right into the black failure of this sarlacc. The sweet smell that In-ho felt previously replaced by sickening. Apparently this plant lured insects to its aroma to eat them after. So if he lingers here a little more, then he will go to the abyss. Calling the sword, he managed to cut the grassy stem and land on the ground thanks to the skill of fencing. The second level of In-ho made it gently. The liana again attacked him and wrapped around his legs, and another predatory mouth attacked from above. In-ho grabbed one of the processes and soared 4 meters up. Then he chopped it off and jumped down. The main stalk to the touch was like a jelly, so that after sticking a sharp blade into it, he began to go down, cutting it with his own weight. Thanks to the perk, the power of attack, it was possible to cut the thick stem to the very ground. When the stems dispersed, he saw in the depths of the plexus something reminiscent of the heart. Most likely it was a vulnerable place for a predatory flower, who again attacked the athlete. But he dodged. It was unpleasant. He already thought that he cut off all the stems from above. But it turns out there is another persistent process. The guy again called his sword, rolled under a thick liana, and cut her down under the root. A purple slurry sprayed from the stump like blood in an animal. However, the process regenerated right in front of the athlete's horror, which meant that all his efforts were in vain. He had to run again so that the vines did not grit. There were only 3 stems. But even if they quickly cut them down again, if you go to the frontal attack, this will also not give anything, because they have too much difference in the dimensions, and an unexpected attack will not work due to a large number of stems. Then In-ho remembered the vulnerable place to which he was supposed to get. This time, he did not chop, but fled past the processes using the skill of acceleration. Unlike 2 processes that pursued him, the third did not go beyond the zone and guarded the main stem. So he protects a vulnerable place, understood In-ho. Having made a false movement, he again jumped onto the main stem. A huge heart was beating deep under his plexus, due to which the plant could move. A sharp sword pierced him, and then screaming out, the predator began to wander and fall. He killed Rosianka, the delicate predator of the jungle. At the 13th level, he was the first to commit such a feat. The skill of fencing grew by 10%, and as a trophy of In-ho, the seed of the predator got. For the first time, he got something after the murder of the monster. This seed could be planted, and then it would grow mimicking under the environment. But it was possible to eat, with a part of another living creature, and then it worked as a revolutionary potion. Only the appearance of a living creature was copied, but this was interested in In-ho. In an emergency, this could be useful, and the guy returned the seed to the storage. But then he saw that a swarm of huge OS was already flying to the place of his fight. With the help of a mustache like horns, the wasps split the solid shell of beetles and ate them. Not far in the rocks, there was a whole hive where the wasps dragging prey. With such an amount, it was not clear how to kill them all. First of all, the guy carefully approached the hive where the dead washing was lying. Apparently beetles killed her. The attention of Roy was abstractly in the other side, so it was still safe. All 3 goals were in front of him. The rooted enemy is a swarm, a mobile enemy is a beetle, and the flying enemy is huge wasps. In-ho looked again in the direction where the low rumble came from, as if from a whole airfield. If you smell in the blood of the OS, then you cannot attract their attention next to the hive. The trouble was that the beetles continued to arrive even faster than the previous one. The main threat of OS was in their great crowding. You could be attacked immediately by hundreds of individuals. They were deeply in the cave, their hive, so the wasps carefully guarded it. The system offered him all 2 options, thought In-ho. The first is to escape without any awards. The second is the risk of life to fulfill the tasks of this lesson. The choice was not simple from him. His survival in this new world depended. But In-ho chose the third, take care of himself and escape, because he covered the bee with the corpse of the bee, because it is not necessary to take the trophies only from the system. The instructor studied the case of a strange guy. His assessment has not yet been completed. For many years that he spent here, he met many amazing people. For the most part, these were soldiers or martial artists who trained all their lives. A small part, these are born killers for whom violence is simply a pleasant process. But this guy was endowed with a unique ability to use the system itself. His flexible mind does not allow even a grain of information to slip away. In addition, he knows how to think unsolvedly. 10 years later, he can reach the initial level. But In-ho returned to the room earlier, all in the mud and mucus of dead monsters. The instructor said that he was waiting for him and praised him for a good job. With its current abilities, it is difficult to observe this level. However, when the instructor looked at the statistics, he saw that the guy still killed one monster. Who said that he would just look, said Inho and grinned. Then the double praised him for the murder of Rosyanka. The guy himself, however, was not arrogant because he killed only one. Yes, and a huge Elogian could not cope, he added. Against Rosyanka, they act as a detachment of 3-4 staff, and Roy OS attacks several teams at all. The instructor comforted it. The company hunts with teams, the guy understood with surprise. The instructor nodded. Even so, weeks, if one person could defeat all the OS, then their honey would not be so high. Inho listened more carefully to the words about the cost of honey. Even one piece was enough to violate the restructuring process by the instructor. The guy returned to the door, and the double asked him what he was planning. Since honey's so valuable, he wanted to go back and ask to tell how to do it. The instructor could not believe his ears. The words seemed some kind of joke. Inko was grateful to him for the lesson and would put the highest score to the double if he had such an opportunity, since honey should at least try to pick him up. The instructor frowned. A trial lesson was a violation by itself. Moreover, the guy was able to defeat Rosyanka, and if it turns out that he took the award, this entails a disciplinary sanction. But he was very curious because he told the guy to reach out, and then he handed him a pass for initial fencing. The entrance and exit opened at the same time, so that he could enter and go out at any time thanks to this pass, the instructor explained. Outside, some kind of noise came as if someone was breaking into the door. An urgent business, said Inho, and said goodbye to his double. He thought that the meeting with a strong enemy had his effect, and that there were interesting people in the 13th district. However, then the formidable defenders of the hive penetrated through the open door to the room, and the instructor was very surprised to see them here. And then he remembered the guy's question about honey and thought that it was somehow connected. Inho returned to the broken streets of the Night Soul, and the system informed him that he received a pass. This green card made it possible to enter and go out, but only to him. It was easier than he thought. Looking at the watch, Inho saw that now almost 9 in the evening, although he spent about a day in another room. So time could flow differently in different places. It was absent 10 minutes of real time. When the opportunity appears, he decided to explore this phenomenon in more detail. When Inho looked around the corner, he saw there a chain that cried when reading some kind of letter. He carefully called her and saw the sad face of this persistent girl.